Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Hang Up here on the line. It's Wednesday night. I'm going to be here. I have a guest as well, but we're working on some tech issues related to stuff hidden behind the scenes, and hopefully all that works out. But it's all right because it's Wednesday, and that means I'm here for you guys to help me with my therapy on just becoming a better person in general. So one of the polls we can put up is Matt too mean? You can just put that poll up and we can find out whether or not I'm too mean, because I always listen to the feedback. But one of the things is when people call in to be like, oh, I wish Matt would be, maybe cuss less or yell less or whatever else. Or I think there's a better way. If you think you have a better way to do the show, as I've said a million times, go do it, get the data, come back, because until then, you don't necessarily know what's going on. But this isn't why I'm here today. This is nothing to bitch about. I'm kind of hung up on a couple of different things. One is that there were a couple of walkouts staged at various commencement addresses. And when Jerry Seinfeld spoke at one of the universities, a number of students walked out, in part because he recently kind of whined a little bit about how the extreme left and PC crap has changed television to where stuff that you could get away with or that wasn't, noticeably objectionable, maybe in the 70s, 80s, 90s, or whatever else, is no longer acceptable. And he was kind of lamenting this change. Now, I think we agree that it's true. I think it's a change for the better. I think that having fewer rape jokes and fewer homophobic jokes and fewer transphobic jokes and fewer body shaming jokes and jokes based on stereotype and lazy humor that punches down. I think having less of that is generally a better thing. There's plenty of places for that. And this isn't about me being concerned about things that people might find objectionable. I'm fine with objectionable. My favorite comedian is Jimmy Carr. I'm not remotely bothered by things that are truly shocking and offensive and just absolutely wild. Some of the stuff that Arden and I just went and saw Jimmy live when he was here in Austin, and I've watched nearly everything he's ever done. And there's maybe a couple things here and there that kind of I went, ooh, kind of look side-eyed at, but for the most part, he reminds me a little of a British kind of almost Don Rickles, where Don was going to would make fun of absolutely everybody, and that took the sting out of it. It was the shtick. And so Jimmy Carr, not Jimmy Carter, Jimmy Carr, basically does the same thing. If I'm going to be as offensive as possible about a number of different subjects across the board, but he's not just like, oh, let me make a weak trans joke. His jokes are smart and they're generally good. So this isn't just about me being easily offended. I'm not. I'm not offended by comedy. I'm offended by stupidity, I think, probably more than anything. But Seinfeld was talking about how the nature of things have changed in comedy when it comes to television shows. He's like, where, you used to be able to come home and there would be this show and this show and this show on. Where is that now? Well, I'll tell you where it is right now. It's right here on YouTube. It's here in shorts. It's here in individual programs. It is, on various streaming services. And there's a lot out there to watch. And there's revivals of certain things. There was a revival of One Day at a Time for a couple of years and other things. And so it just feels weird to have Seinfeld basically saying, he's loaded. He doesn't care about the money. He doesn't need the money. He's doing stand-up. He's doing stand-up specials, but he's basically saying that you can't do the stuff on TV that you used to do. And that bugs him. And that's why people are turning to stand-up routines, because they're not policed as hard. And so he's lamenting the good old days when you could do a rape joke and nobody would call you out for it. And there's a lot of people who found that problematic, if not downright offensive, more offensive than lazy jokes of, what's the deal with left-wing liberals? They're ruining all the comedy. It's wild to watch that. But also the governor of Virginia, I think, was at a commencement address just the other day. No, I'm definitely not a Dave Chappelle fan, for the person who asked in chat. But the governor of Virginia was giving commencement speech and just droves of students walked out of there. we're seeing a rise in student-led protests at universities, primarily about Gaza, primarily about what's going on in Israel right now. And it's wild for me to watch how the news covers it, how our government reacts, and how the general public reacts. I noticed that Bill Maher was having a sit down with Bill Burr, and Bill Maher was kind of talking about, oh, would you go do this at Harvard? Are you not aware that there's protests? And Bill Burr was basically, yeah, I don't watch the news. But go watch, not right now, but later. There's a clip on, I think is it the Humanist Report? In any case, he covers Bill Maher being just absolutely smug and condescending to Bill Burr, and Bill Burr just smacking back nice and hard and basically like making Maher look silly. It's like, oh yeah, you've solved the entire problem. Just stop attacking Israel and everything will be just fine. As if anything could be simplified like that. But we're seeing this not just with regard to what we might have seen in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where people were protesting the Vietnam War, not on necessarily religious grounds, and not even objecting on secular humanist grounds or just general humanist grounds. There were objections. There were concerns about government overreach. Should we be drafting people? There's all kinds of issues that have come up over the years, and these things run in cycles. And it strikes me as heartening that while the last president of the United States is currently on trial in New York, and I think Wednesday is the day off, so Michael Cohen testified. I listened to coverage of the court case, but I haven't listened to, I mean, obviously none of us have listened to what's going on there because they're not broadcasting or recording it. The case, there's a lot going on, and I can't wait to actually spend some time covering it, especially we get somebody in here with some expertise and taking a look at how this is going to impact things, because we've got the Supreme Court potentially weighing in on whether or not Trump has immunity at the same time that this trial is going on. At the same time, other trials are potentially getting ready to start up. And in a brilliant move this morning, President Biden basically posted a video saying, Trump already lost 2 debates to me, and he didn't show up for any more of them. But now he's acting like he wants a debate. So I'm in. Let's do 2 debates. And so Biden throws out the challenge. Trump says yes. Now there's 2 debates scheduled, one in June, one in September. And I think the VP nominees are going to debate in July. I don't know the specifics about either debate, but I can tell you, if they happen when my show is on, we'll be going live with those just like we have in the past. And if not, I'm pretty sure Jimmy's out today, but I'm pretty sure Jimmy and I will end up doing Cus I Wanna, to walk through the debate and find out what's going on, because by most measures, the economy is doing much, much better, despite what the naysayers are saying. One of the biggest problems, of course, is the interest rate, and the interest rate is a measure of the economy that's important and valuable for measuring how good things are or aren't. And what strikes me as odd is the interest rate right now is crap. It's garbage. But other measures of the economy, like income to debt and percentage of credit card debt and all these various things, they're all better. And yet there's a segment of the population that thinks the economy is actually worse than it was under Trump. And this is the same segment of the population that, I don't know, decided to mock me for getting vaccinated, who at Reptile Expos, I was watching a dude walk around with a t-shirt that said Biden didn't fix anything but an election, which was, I've already pointed out how stupid that is, because if there was stuff to fix, that means, Trump didn't fix it. If it was broken when Trump left, you're waiting for Biden to fix it and he hasn't fixed it. You need to go back to wherever it actually broke as well. But it's we're in a weird kind of state of flux. And I think a lot of it has to do with not knowing what's getting ready to happen. You have a former president on trial for felony for the first time ever in the history of the world. This is a big deal. And there's tons of coverage, but it's all kind of secondhand because there's not cameras allowed in the courtroom. And there's potential constitutional crisis. There's a potential crisis related to the election that's coming up. Is he going to be eligible? Is he going to get convicted, but then also become president? And then, then you have can he pardon himself? Well, he can't pardon himself for this because this is a state crime and not a federal crime. And it's just absolutely wild. And it's almost too much for anybody to wrap their head around. And that, I think, is a huge part of the problem. It is so frustrating. We as a society have been beaten down by just the absolute absurdity of all this. You remember when everybody was up in arms because Obama wore a tan suit? A tan suit, or didn't have the flag pin on in a picture, or somebody running for office had a daughter that was an unwed mother. Ooh, it's scandal. It's scandal. It's scandal. We're talking about here a guy who paid hush money to cover up a sexual relationship that he didn't want to come out right after the Access Hollywood tape and blow up his election so that he couldn't become president. And had his lawyer paid the bill and then got reimbursed along with extra money to cover the taxes they had to pay on that because they lied and listed it as income rather than a payoff as it was. If he'd have just paid her and said, look, here's $130,000, shut your mouth, I own your story, there's no crime. And this is where the phrase of the cover-up is often worse than the crime. It's the cover-up that is the crime here. And it denies the voting public access to information that might have impacted their vote. It might not have impacted their vote. So this is a hot mess. But watching students engage in walkouts and protests is encouraging to me, even if I don't always agree with all of them in every way on every subject, because it shows that there's a segment of the population that represents the future of this nation that is not ready to give up. The rest of the people who've been beaten down to the point of wanting to give up, some people are tired, and yet it would, as easy as it would be for the younger generation, the graduating generation at high schools and colleges, as easy as it would be for them to just be like, hey, I'm focused on my career. I got my stuff. I got student loans to pay down. I got, I'm trying to build all this other stuff. I only care about the economy. They don't only care about the economy. They care about social justice issues. They care about human welfare, and they care about individual rights and responsibilities. They are upset about the change in abortion access and the destruction of Roe and the chipping away at the constitutionally protected rights that we think we have or that we think we should have. They are upset at world events where there are conflicts and wars, and while the United States may be doing its best to try to be on the side of good, it's not all the time. And these are complex situations where it's not easy to say, oh, here's the problem right here, because if it was, we'd have fixed this already. But I find myself absolutely encouraged by that. I want to talk about my guest's new book. David wrote Playing God, An Evolutionary History of World Religion. And that book is actually books 5, 6, and 7 of the Complete Heretic's Guide to Western Religion. This subsection is about world religion. And there are other books in that series. I keep scrolling past the page that has my list right here. Bloop, bloop, bloop. So sorry, there's like 5 white pages. So, books in the Complete Heretic's Guide to Western Religion. Book 1 is The Mormons, which is wild because David wasn't a Mormon. David was Actually, bring David in. Why are we waiting? Everybody, welcome David Fitzgerald to the show. So you weren't a Mormon. You were a Southern Baptist, much like me, and yet your first book in the Complete Heretic's Guide to Western Religion was the Mormons. Before we get into all the others, why did you start with the Mormons?
Because that was the one thing my atheist brain, Baptist brain could agree on. I hope you guys are hearing me okay, because the right now is just Bermuda Triangle level. I really hope my words are reaching out to you. So let me know if you're hearing what I'm saying.
I'm getting about 3/4 of what you're saying. So, yeah, it's really choppy. And so books 2, 3, and 4 were Jesus Mything in Action, which addressed mythicism in some regards for most of it, but actually pointing out problems with the Jesus narrative. Tell us about books 5, 6, and 7 for playing God here.
Yeah, I'll try to do it in small bits so it comes across basically as a side effect of looking into the historical Jesus question. One happened to me over the years is that a Buddhist would and say, "Yeah, Buddha."
Okay, we gotta pause.
No.
I think when you watch back what just happened, yeah, you mentioned researching the Jesus mythism thing, and one thing that happened was a Buddha thing, and then there was lots of chops and stuttering and freezing.
Oh, goodness.
I apologize, but I don't know how we can make this work. I don't think we're going to be able to have a discussion where people are going to actually hear and understand most of what's there. So why don't I do this?
I'm so sorry.
I got a few calls in the line. Why don't we stick a fork in this? Okay. And we'll see what we can do on the tech front to get you back on another Wednesday. I will go through. Would you mind if I read through the preface and perhaps the prelude, pre-human, pre-religion, or portions of that as kind of a primer for folks, so that and talk about the book on my own, and then once we get some tech issues, we'll get you back to discuss it, and maybe by then I'll have read the whole thing.
Hooray! If we can do that, that would be awesome. Yeah.
Yep.
And again, I super apologize. This is so frustrating. All right.
We'll get it sorted. I appreciate the effort, Dave. Thanks so much. And I've got calls waiting, so we'll be able to get to calls fairly quickly. Take care, my friend. I will see you soon. And my apologies to everybody.
Sounds good. Take care.
We are not going to get to keep David on here, but there's just no way. It would be a disservice to him, his book, and the audience for you guys to get like 4 out of every 8 words while we're talking about this. So while we're queuing up calls, I'm going to do what I said I'd do. And so here's the preface for Playing God and Evolutionary History of World Religion. This trilogy, Playing God and Evolution of wait, the professional speaker here, tongue-tied. This trilogy, Playing God and Evolutionary History of World Religion, comprises books 5, 6, and 7 of the Complete Heretic's Guide to Western Religion series, and does 3 things. First, it lays out the evolutionary stages that all major world religions have followed from prehistory to the present. Second, it looks into the surprising evolution of monotheism and all the unexpected twists and turns it took to get from many gods to just one. Finally, Playing God assembles all the founder figures of the top 10 most important and influential world religions, plus some honorable mentions, and examines each of their biographies to see what we really can and can't know about their real stories, and in particular, which of them are God's imaginary friends. If you've seen Jesus Mything in Action, the previous 3 books in this series, this is David's writing this in first person, so I'll read it that way. You know, I've developed a bad habit of setting out to write 1 book and winding up with 3, for which I apologize, but I promise it's worth it. Going into this project, I expected Volume 1 to cover the evolution of world religion, Volume 2 monotheism, and Volume 3 would tackle the problematic bios of our founder figures. But the best laid plans of mice and men being what they are, the layout is slightly different now. Book 1, which, by the way, this is all together in one package. Book 1 is the chapters 1 through 5 are the evolution of God. chapters 6 through 13 are the gods of monotheism. And I told David before, I love the fact that there's a plural gods right before monotheism, because it really gets to the heart of some of the things that we find most interesting about the history of world religions, where it's not completely known what the exact first religious type or religion might be, or the full-on evolution of the religious mindset isn't clear. And I'm hoping that David's book goes into good chunks of that. But we tend to think that the earliest religions were monotheistic, or sorry, were animistic, where we were finding we were finding gods and spirits out in the wild. We had the ancestor gods and the gods of the trees and all of these things that were kind of animistic. And we build from that so that there's this kind of mini god view starting off at the beginning. And you get the Roman and the Greek pantheons. And then you gradually whittle this down to something that comes closer and closer to monotheism. There's also this category of henotheism, which is sort of in between the two, where there are various gods, but there's one primary god and everything else is kind of like a demigod sort of thing. Book 2 is God's Imaginary Friend. Chapters 14 through 21 covers Judaism, and chapters 22 through 25 cover Christianity. And book 3 is God's Imaginary Friends. Islam comprises chapters 26 through 31, and the Eastern religions are chapters 32 through 34. That's what David wrote about this book right now. I don't yet have the release date information there, but I'm going to go ahead and take a couple of calls real quick since I'm flying solo. If you're a theist out there and you were desperate to engage David on mythicism, that's probably going to have to wait. But if you're willing to actually call in and defend what your religious views are, I'm in full Zen mode. I'm so, just tired and chill. And despite the fact that we just had technical problems, today is probably the best day for somebody to call in and honestly engage. One of the things we got to keep reminding people is there's a delay, there's a hold button and everything else. We are not just trying to shut everything down. I mean, that you can't have a show there, but answer the question you're asked and engage. I'm going to start taking calls with Sam in Georgia. Pronouns are he, him. Sam's an atheist, wants to talk about the reductio ad absurdum argument. So welcome, Sam. How you doing?
Doing all right, Matt. How's it going?
Well, tech issues. I'm flying solo, so we'll see.
So the reason why I'm calling in is because I engage a lot with these flat Earth people on Twitter, and
Yeah.
I wanted to know if the reductio ad absurdum is a good way to just dismantle pretty much everything they have to say. And the way that I go about it is typically this: I'll explain how pretty much every institution or individual, like astronomer, professional or amateur, would have to be lying in order for this to be an accurate state of affairs. And eventually one of them would come out with evidence to support their claims, and that has never happened, thus reducing it to ridicule and making it seem ridiculous.
Yeah.
Or does that just become an argument from popularity?
It could be either. So for those who aren't aware, reductio ad absurdum is essentially when you grant a premise in order to show that leads to an absurdity or a contradiction later on. And so if you granted the premise that all the various scientists from all the various disciplines that rely on a globe model in a heliocentric solar system, which I guess they would all have to be heliocentric. It wouldn't be a solar system if it was geocentric. But if you show that everybody involved in this would either have to be lying or delusional or just immune to the evidence, that leads to an absurdity. The problem is, from what I've seen from a lot of flat earthers or globe skeptics, however they want to call themselves, or whatever they want to call themselves, is a flat acceptance of that yes, the entire scientific community is perpetrating a fraud, but some of them just don't know it, and that's an appealing notion to people who think they've, found the secret that they don't want you to know. And so while I think what you're describing is a fine way to go about addressing this, what I can't say is, does it work? Because I generally, like, I can count the number of times I've had conversations with flat earthers, maybe on one hand, maybe two. I mean, I have done this for 20 years. I can't remember how many of them, but it doesn't happen very often. And so you might have had this conversation, Sam, way more times than I have. What have you seen in response?
Typically, they just don't really engage with it because it points out just how ridiculous all of it is. And, well, I don't know if these people are actually real or if they're just complete trolls, but yeah, I think I try to do what we usually do here on the show. I say we, where I just try to talk with the person, but not to them specifically. Try to go explain it to somebody else this way and go, yeah, okay, this is just how ridiculous you have to go to accept this thing is true. Like, how much baggage does this idea hold? And it turns out a fuck ton.
Yeah. And your concern about potentially being involved in sort of a fallacious appeal to authority, that's a legitimate concern.
Populum.
Because, oh, sorry, populum, yes. You're a fallacious appeal to popularity. That's a legitimate concern. Wow. I don't know how I screwed that up, but thank you for correcting it. It's a legitimate concern because it's tied to an appeal to authority, which is how I got there, which is the people who are advocating for a globe model and a heliocentric solar system are often accused of just either appealing to the authority of scientists, or in the case of where you're saying everybody would have to be in on it, perhaps the popularity of this idea within the scientific community. But the popularity of an idea isn't a fallacy unless you're saying that it's true because it's popular. If in fact it's popular because it's true, then the popularity is additional confirmation of that. It's only a fallacy if you're saying, we know that it's a globe because all of these scientists say so. That would be a fallacy. But if we say we are confident it's a globe because the evidence leads to that conclusion, and this is the scientific consensus from experts, now you're not appealing to the popularity of the idea, and you're not appealing to the authority of the scientists. You are saying it's not just because somebody is a scientist or because many of the scientists do this. You're saying the evidence is the thing that we're pointing to suggest this is true. And because of that, the scientific community's consensus is, yes, the Earth is an oblate spheroid, and the sun is at the center of our solar system. It's not a fallacious appeal. And knowing the difference between those, when it's a fallacy and when it's not, is going to be important, because you're going to get accused of that. And you can just be like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that it's true because most scientists say so. That would be absurd.
I would agree with that. I would get called out on that, but I'm not too sure that they're smart enough or know what fallacies are to actually call me out on something like that. But because of that, I do try to do a self-policing type of thing and regulate that myself. I'd rather not get caught with my pants down.
Yeah, no. It's worth it to ask and prepare, and it's also a good topic for anybody else who's engaging on any other issues. If you're out there, folks, and by the way, I just sent a video live on Monday night from my Atheist Debates project about whether or not God can communicate clearly. It's a new argument of mine in the line of divine hiddenness and inconsistent revelation arguments. But it's worth it for the people who may have to engage with like against a creationist idea with anti-evolution. They're going to use the same types of things as the flat earthers, because both of them are in a position where they are denying and rejecting the scientific consensus. And when you're in that position, what can you do to defend that? Science either has to be a conspiracy, or a lie, or There needs to be some sort of confusion on it. And so there's a limited number of lines of argument somebody can take to counter the scientific consensus. And it's worth it for all of us to understand that when we point to scientific consensus, we are not pointing to the popularity of the idea, how many people are advocating for it. We're saying the evidence is so compelling that the overwhelming majority of scientists that are experts in this field are in agreement that this is the conclusion that is pointed to by the evidence. And we're not saying this is true because of that, or that this is absolutely true, because science isn't making proclamations of truth. Science is just pointing out models and building models and theories that are the best explanation we currently have for the available facts. It's important for everybody to know that.
I know Forrest gives similar examples to maps, how every map is wrong, but some are useful type of idea.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that might be everything. I had a potential tangential topic, but I've now forgotten it. But
well, if you're
yeah.
reminded and there aren't a stack of theists waiting, call back and we'll get into it again.
I give it a shot, but I got to go back to work, so we'll see.
All right. Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it. All right. And calling in from the UK, it's Pip, pronouns are they, them, with a question about whether or not atheist activists are focusing too much on specifics. Hey, Pip, how are you?
Hello, I'm okay. Can you hear me all right?
I hear you just fine. Welcome to the show. How can I help?
Fantastic. Just right off the bat, I will remind you that I'm a bit deaf, and so if I don't 100% hear what you've said, I might ask to repeat. It's not me being obtuse. It's just me ensuring that I've heard what you are saying, correctly. But
Sure.
More to the point, this is actually something that relates to two recent calls you've had, including the one that was just on before me, and that's ensuring that our tools of skepticism are sharp enough so that we are recognizing why the ideas are faulty rather than just these ideas are wrong. Because I got into and learned a lot about, both creationism in the US and also just skepticism in general through, anti-creationism and people like Thunderfoot back in the day. And then when, around it was in 2009 or so, he suddenly shifted to starting to talk about Anita Sarkeesian and feminism, and he was using the same old logical fallacies and rubbish arguments to, demonize a new target, even though he probably would have called out those same types of arguments against creationists. And so, while I am fully aware that, obviously, atheism is not a monolith, the only shared value that we have is that we do not believe in God. Whatever else is, up in the air. But what I want to make sure is that we do not forget that nobody is immune to things like confirmation bias and many other types of, flaws in human reasoning. So that when, an atheist is spreading these bad ideas and using the same bad arguments, we can understand why they are bad and not just brush over it because it's not tackling religion.
Definitely. I mean, I remember when I first got involved, I'd been a skeptic for years and a huge fan of James Randi and Penn and Teller and others. So I was following a number of things in the skeptic movement even before I ever really focused on my religion. And so I'm coming at this, and I've had big disagreements with people in this skeptic community, and they're wrong. But the primary disagreements is once I found my way out of religion, it occurred to me that I went to the Amazing Meeting 7 in Las Vegas. Beth and I went, and it was great. I got to meet a bunch of people. We were, involved with some of them in other areas, but at that particular the Amazing Meeting, Hal Bidlack was the MC and basically started off the conference by saying, "Hey, we know that there's a lot of atheists here, but skepticism doesn't have some requirement that you be an atheist. And so we'd like you all to remember that there are plenty of religious people here who are also great skeptics." And I was like, yeah, that's not true. Because, yes, skepticism doesn't make pronouncements about the conclusions you're supposed to reach. Skepticism doesn't, like science, not making proclamations about truth, nor does it have a litmus test. But if you're going to value the principles of skepticism, where you're going to care about having a logically valid and potentially sound argument before you're going to accept something, having your model of reality match reality as best you can, to reserve judgment on issues withhold belief until there's sufficient evidence for the belief, then when it comes to skeptical analysis of claims, none of the claims of any religion have withstood the rigorous investigation of critical thinking and skepticism. No religion has demonstrated the truth of its claims. And what Hal and others would say at that event is that skepticism, by virtue of just being a tool set and not a list of beliefs, has nothing to say about untestable claims. Their whole thing was the God beliefs that many of these people are advocating for are ultimately untestable, and therefore they cannot be investigated. They are not subject to skepticism. And that offended me, still offends me. It's a damnable lie, because there's nothing that is immune from skepticism. And what skepticism has to say about untestable claims is that by virtue of them being untestable, belief cannot be warranted. And as long as that's the case, as long as it's, hey, skepticism says I should wait until I have sufficient evidence for this. Anybody who's advocating for a religious view, a supernatural view, they should be able to present you with a valid argument supported by evidence. Now, the one area that we can't do anything about is if God revealed himself to you privately and he doesn't reveal himself to me, nothing I can do about that. And it may be that your particular religious belief is justified, but it's only justified for you. A la David Hume, revelation is necessarily first person, and to everybody else it's hearsay. And so I pushed back on the skeptic community. I actually did a talk about how the skeptic community isn't atheistic enough to suit me, and that's just a matter of personal preference. I find the various gods to be a much bigger elephant in the room than UFOs and Bigfoot and psychics, but all of those things are worth addressing. But the other half of the talk was that the atheist community isn't skeptical enough to suit me. And that's not just a matter of personal preference. That's a fucking embarrassment, because there are atheists running around absolutely who know nothing. They're making shit arguments. They're posting crap memes. They are doing actual damage and making the rest of us look silly or stupid. And it's all well-intentioned, and you're trying to figure out the best way to address it. And pushing back on that with the skeptic community actually got me a talking to. I was out with a friendly acquaintance who told me there were plenty of people in the skeptic community who were not happy with the talk that I gave. And I was like, sounds like they got a problem. But show me where I'm wrong and I'll change my mind. And they couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very, very good point, and I really appreciate that perspective. This is a similar note to what I was thinking about your conversation with an atheist caller on the Sunday show last week, which was touching on, friendship with religious moderates. And my personal philosophy as far as secular humanism is concerned is something I've repeated once or twice in like chats and calls on the line, but it's that I believe in a universe that doesn't care and people who do. And as such, if my religious friends became atheists tomorrow, I don't think anything substantial would have changed because I know them as people. Do I think that they are following a very flawed and they are potentially cultivating a harmful idea? Yes. But I also recognize that religion is as much a social construct as it is, a wide part of culture, in the sense that no religious person is going to be following their holy book 100%. I'm sure we both recognize that that's completely impossible given the amount of contradictions. And so what I'm looking for is less to do with the claim, is there a God? Although, as you rightly said, this is a very important question and it can spill over into unintentionally cultivating a lot of harm. But I also want to get to the core of what ideas they are expressing. And so when I am talking with, trans theists, for example, they are trying to express an idea of, love and acceptance and also knowledge of the science behind, gender identity and all that. And as such, they are directly opposing the religious bigotry which shares their religious belief in name only. And so while you may very well be a lot harsher on religious moderates than I am, and you are well entitled to do so, I'm not necessarily suggesting that that's wrong, I also think that it's important that we recognize, as I said, what ideas are trying to be expressed and where are they coming from? Because then I think we can absolutely get to the core of why these false ideas are wrong or harmful and overall create a better community.
Yeah, I'm wondering though, because you're talking about, are we focusing too much on the specifics of religious claims and not the underlying logic behind them? I care about what people believe and why. That's the primary focus. And so where are you primarily concerned that we're focused too much on like a specific, and what underlying logic do you think we should address instead? Because instead of talking about that summary, it sounded to me like you were talking about not anything related to logic or the specifics of religion, but about people and what their goals are.
Well, what people's goals are tie into a lot of their mindset and where these beliefs are coming from. Because, someone like Dawkins, who is repeating the same high school level, or even primary school level understanding of biology, is clearly not willing to challenge his biases on that regard. And as such, I feel that the problem is less so that, someone does or does not believe in a God, and more so why they do so. Because if we take a more empathetic approach in that regard, I think we are more likely to cultivate reason towards people who are expressing good through their religion, if that makes sense.
I think so. I'm not completely sure if I follow what it is.
Yeah, it is. It is a tricky thing. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no. It's just if we're talking from a strategy standpoint, and I run across a caller, I'm basically going to ask them what they believe and why, and I'm going to ask them specifically to tell me what it is that they believe so that I can find a point that I disagree with. And then I'm going to address that from a logical and evidential standpoint. So if somebody says, oh, I think, I believe there's a God because something can't come from nothing. And so now they've told me that they believe in some God and what the reason is. And when I dig in on what their reason is, if they say, oh, it's because something can't come from nothing. Well, there's a whole bunch of questions there. Like, how do you know that? And who's advocating for that? Because that's not necessarily any of the scientific models. And also we're not asserting that we know. And so you go through each of those. And to me, that is addressing the foundation underneath the belief. I worry that focusing on the specifics in the same way that you're kind of concerned about it puts us in a position of making bad arguments. Like, it's really easy to do. For example, the Catholic Church is a criminal organization that deserves to be shut down, razed to the ground, and all of its buildings given away to the victims of the abusers that it hid and shielded and funneled around from parish to parish. But that's not in any way an argument against Christianity or Catholicism and whether or not it's true. It could be the case that the underlying claims are true, and yet everything about the church organization, it doesn't even have to be everything, but things about the church organization are absolutely corrupt and immoral. So you're not making an argument against the truth of Catholicism by going after the real problems that the Catholic Church has. And so I want to make sure that, I'm trying to represent the best features of skepticism in what questions you're going to ask, what are you going to focus on? And because if at the end of the day, somebody says, oh, I believe there's a God because the sky's pink. And you say, yeah, but the sky's not pink. Well, now you've demolished the foundation of their religion, and nothing else that they say matters until they come up with a new justification for why they believe. And then that leads to the obvious objection of, hang on, you used to believe for reason A, and when reason A went away, now you believe for reason B. Are you leading the evidence? Are you trying to massage things to get to a conclusion you like? Because when I used to believe that murder was wrong because God said so. And when I found my way out of religion, I had to go back and reevaluate, is murder wrong? And why is it wrong? What is the actual objection here? Because if I can no longer appeal to it's wrong because God says so, then I need another foundation. And it turns out it's a really easy foundation, that the principles of a secular moral system, beginning with really simple foundations, could be viewed as much as, hey, I'd rather not die. I'd rather not the people that I care about not die. And so I'm going to encourage a society that discourages running around killing people. And by the way to discourage it is to view this as if it is wrong. It is wrong because it is inconsistent with our foundations, which are empathy and well-being. And we will then take actions to ensure that if somebody does this, we prevent them from continuing to do it. The problem is a society can lead down to, okay, so we're going to kill them, or we're going to lock them up to protect us all from them. And now you're in the weeds on a number of different things, but they're good weeds because we need to do the weeding out there so that we have a nice, clear pasture to walk through to understand the moral landscape. And I just went off on a slightly different thing.
Yeah, I actually agree with most of what you said there, and that's why I think that when we are talking and we are critiquing religion as an idea, we need to keep in mind that we are tackling these bad ideas that are being cultivated and are being exploited for, personal gain and bigotry and the status quo and so on and so forth. Because even when like my Christian friends might look at a pastor who is tying the Bible to a baseball bat and, just demolishing, a Barbie dollhouse or something or other, because it's supposedly sinful. That to me is both. We can both address how utterly absurd it is that even if there was a concept of a God, whether he'd really be concerned, whatever, would be concerned about if people watch the Barbie movie or play with a specific brand of dolls. And so I'm just the short-term memory kind of crapped out there, and I'm trying to, kind of loop around back to my point. And so I think what it might be is that I am perhaps a bit more sympathetic to the moderates of religion, because while I agree that they might potentially cultivate bad ideas, I am also appealing to their base empathy for others. And when people like Dawkins show how they are so ready to, switch off when faced with their own biases, I think that we need to be careful. And I want to emphasize, this is why I love, calling into these shows. This is why I love, calling shows like this on the line, because I feel that we can get into the nitty gritty, both why people believe and why, an idea is faulty. I just think that, yeah, sorry, go on. I know I'm rambling.
On that note, Pip, I don't want us to go round and round in circles, and I've got theists callers that are calling in now, so we maybe have a good chance to find out a little more about kind of the what people believe and why. So I appreciate the thought and the conversation, but I'm going to move on to some theists now. So
not a problem. No problem. Like I said, I really appreciate the conversation, and I really thank you for the time. I've been looking forward to this. Good luck.
Cheers. Thanks, Pip. Always have an interesting thought whenever they call in. Let me tell you a little bit about what's going on, and then we'll get to our first theistic caller for today. You're watching The Hang Up here on the line. The Hang Up is my Wednesday night show where I get to talk about whatever's on my mind. We were supposed to have David Fitzgerald on as a guest. We tried twice, including with a reset, but there were some tech issues. So for those of you calling in or wondering, hey, where's David? We're going to reschedule and get that back. I talked a little bit about his book, Playing God, which is actually books 5, 6, and 7 of the Complete Heretic's Guide to Western Religion. And if we have gaps in the show later on, I'll read that prelude of Pre-Human Pre-Religion from 2 million years ago, which is the opening part of his book. As a reminder, in addition to this show, there are a number of other shows on this network on different days and different times. Starting tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central, so about 5 hours prior to now, but tomorrow is going to be the Transatlantic Call-In Show with Arden and Josie. If you are someone who's a trans person struggling to defend your views and with questions and concerns, if you are an egg and looking for some advice, if you are a transphobic individual and proud of it and want to push back on their notions about trans identity and trans rights and trans medical issues, and if you're someone who's been called transphobic and you don't understand why, and you'd really rather not be, you'd rather be viewed much closer to being an ally, all of those are really good reasons to call into the Transatlantic Call-In Show and talk to two real live trans folks who will let you know about their experience and who are in fact experts on this, having gone through and studied the various arguments and cases. And what happens a lot of times in the anti-trans or the gender critical movement is they'll pass around the same, here's this study that shows this. And what I found is they're all problematic at this point. And we can almost put in little tiers of, I'm a GC, newbie. I'm at level 1 gender critical, and then level 2 and you get all the way up until you get to your graduation point where, at the beginning, you're just like a JK Rowling acolyte, and then you move up the chain. But tomorrow, Transatlantic Call-In Show, 2 p.m. Central. Friday, I've heard there may in fact be a Cus I Wanna, but It's not on the actual list yet. Sundays, we do the Sunday show at 2 p.m. Central, and it usually runs until about 6 or so. Forrest Valkai and Eric, Skeptics and Scoundrels Eric, are going to be on for the regular Sunday show in the afternoon. Then there's the Sunday show after dark, which is going to be Paulogia and John Gleason. That starts at 7 p.m. Central. All these times that I give are Central. And so right about now on Sunday, you can tune in to watch Paul and John take calls on religion and supernatural and things like that. Mondays, the show is Skeptalk, and Monday's show at 6 p.m. is going to be John Gleason and Dr. Aron Adair. That's a great time to call in with non-religious supernatural things that, we should be applying skepticism to, ghosts, UFOs, but any of the oddball questions, you can still call in about religious stuff as well, but anything that doesn't necessarily fit within religion is primed for Monday. Tuesday's show is Chewed Gum at 6 p.m. Central with Eva's Framed and Alyssa Ljub. That is basically the woman show. I know it sounds so weird to say it like that, but the whole point is that a good chunk of the atheist and skeptic speakers and show hosts look too much like me. And there are not enough voices out there. And women get treated completely differently in this movement. I've seen it. I've seen it with my ex-wife. I've seen it with ex-girlfriends. I've seen it with my current girlfriend. I've seen it with show hosts. I've seen it with co-hosts. It is amazing to watch the difference in treatment, but they're focused on sex, sexuality, purity culture, how religion impacts women just generally, in addition to general questions about, religion. They are amazing. Eve can come in and take over my show any day she wants to, pretty much. Just, give me something to do on occasion. And then Wednesday, I'll be back on the Hang Up with Derek from Myth Vision that's next week, but that may have been shuffled. I don't know. Arden, did we shuffle that because of tonight?
Sorry, what was the question?
Next week's Hang Up is me and Derek Myth Vision, but I saw something from David about possibly doing next week. Are we?
I have not worked anything out with anyone yet. I'm going to have to message people and yeah.
All right. I will get back to calls, and we're going to start here with Joshua in, is it? Oh my gosh. There's like some kind of weird static going on, Joshua. Joshua pronouns he, him, is a theist from, I think, Michigan here.
Yeah. What's up, Matt? So, generally speaking, I'm very interested in the sort of delivery of formal arguments for a compendium of propositions. Now, what I'm wondering if you can sort of deliver throughout the course of a good faith conversation is a formal argument which establishes the conclusion that atheism is true or not.
How are you defining atheism?
I'm taking atheism to be as it's defined by Mr. Graham Oppie in the literature, which is just the view that, there are no gods.
So there's some weird static thing every time you talk and stop talking. I'm not quite sure what's going on. So my view of atheism is that the minimum. Wow, I'm gonna mute you just so that I'll take you back off mute when I'm done talking. Weird static stuff. So the position that there are no gods is not the minimal definition of atheism, and it's not what everybody uses for atheism. It's not even what organizations use. For me, atheism could be divided into soft atheism or weak atheism, and then strong or hard atheism, however you want to do it. But theism is the position of accepting the claim some God exists. Atheism is the position of not accepting that claim or rejecting that claim. It is not necessarily the assertion that gods don't exist. It is being in a position where if you're just not convinced that there's a God, then you're just as atheist as anybody else. However, you can expand that to be like, for certain gods, I'm convinced they don't exist. And so in order to say that a God doesn't exist, I would argue that it probably needs to be a falsifiable claim, and then you actually need to falsify it. So when we have somebody say something like, how do you show that atheism is true? Well, from my perspective, atheism is the state of not believing that a God exists, It's true because I don't believe that a God exists. And I've met plenty of other people who tell me that they don't believe that a God exists. And since I can't read minds and we generally take people at their word for saying, here's what's going on inside my head, I'm willing to accept that there are other people like me who don't believe that a God exists. Now, for some gods that are potentially falsifiable, I might actually believe that those gods don't exist. But the notion of, can you present a valid and sound argument to show that there are absolutely no gods anywhere? Not that I'm aware of, because as far as I can tell, that's an unfalsifiable claim. Does that address your question?
Okay. Yeah. So, okay, now we've sort of established in this conversation that, you actually aren't able to deliver a formal argument which establishes the conclusion that atheism is true. Right now, as for the sort of ramble there about definitions, I just want to be clear here. All I'm using is the definition that's sort of used and employed in the contemporary sort of philosophy of religion literature. But I mean, I know this sort of new atheist movement is very sort of detached from the literature, wherein you're using your sort of idiosyncratic usage of terms that's sort of not used in the literature whatsoever. Yeah, but that's fine if you actually can't deliver an argument for the proposition. Now there's a further question there. Well, before you start your ramble there, like
no,
yeah,
you don't ever get to tell me to halt and do before you start your ramble. That's just never. I don't know why you would even do that. I'm trying to interject to make sure we're clear on something before we move on to the next thing. Okay, so you can't fault me for not defending a position that I don't hold. If you walk in by saying, I want you to present a defense for this position that you don't hold, isn't that kind of absurd to ask someone to defend a position that they've not stated as theirs?
Yeah. I'm glad we sort of clarified that there is no argument in favor of the proposition. Now there's a further question. So let's just take the.
No, I'm going to mute you again, just to try to keep this. When you say there is no argument, I don't know that that's true. I said for potentially falsifiable gods, there may be in fact an argument. I don't know of an argument and can't conceive of an argument right now that would be universally for every possible god, because there are some that are unfalsifiable. And so there may not be an argument. Whether or not there is an argument for the type of atheist or the atheism definition that you're wanting to address is irrelevant, because the burden of proof is on the theistic side. When somebody claims that a God exists, they have a burden of proof. The people who aren't convinced don't have a burden of proof. Now, does that make sense?
Yeah. Nice job there. Yeah. That does make sense. I'm very glad we sort of got all that out of you there. But that's all sort of out of your system in the conversation, proverbially. But yeah, I'm glad we've established that there isn't an argument for the proposition in question. Now we can have a further conversation about whether or not there are sort of motivations in favor of the theistic worldview. Now, the way that I'm defining God here, right, and the question is going to be whether or not you have an argument against this God specifically, since, you did say that whether or not you actually can disprove the proposition does in part depend on, what exactly it is that the proposition is stating. So I'm just defining God right now as a creator of the universe that is sort of triomni in nature, right? And it's inherently self-revelatory. So now the question is, can you disprove that sort of God, right? The triomni one, that is inherently self-revelatory. And if the answer is no, is it the case that you're agnostic on such a proposition?
So first of all, I have no idea whether or not I can disprove it, because you haven't given a proof for it. You've just asserted that here's your definition, that God is the creator of the universe. He's triomni and self-revelatory. We can go into both of those, and I'd be happy to, because I'd like to understand exactly why you think it is both triomni and self-revelatory. But if you're starting with this, hey, can you disprove this God? I don't know, because you haven't done anything to prove that there's a God. You haven't presented a case for that God. You've just presented a definition of that God. I may be able to demonstrate that the particular God that you're describing clearly doesn't exist if there's some logical contradiction or evidence to the contrary. But the absence of an argument against that God would not demonstrate that God exists, correct?
Yeah, but wait, Matt, you did make a bit of an error there, not to sort of pull your leg or anything, but you actually don't need me to give a proof in order to disprove the proposition.
No,
that's just sort of like a basic reasoning error there.
That's not what I was saying.
You can actually disprove it without. Well, I don't.
Okay, so I'm going to put you on mute. So I asked a question, and that question is very straightforward. Does the absence of a disproof in any way demonstrate that the God you're advocating exists? That's the
Well,
question.
I'm glad you're sort of asking your own question there to dodge mine, which I actually asked previously.
Okay, I'm going to mute you again. I'm doing my best to stay into Zen mode here and to actually have a genuine conversation. You are starting to sound less and less genuine. So once again, I'm going to take you off mute, and I'd like you to answer the question that I asked. And if you answer the question that I asked, then we can continue going on where you can try to defend your creator of the universe. The question is very simple. Does the absence of a disproof of the God claim in any way may mean that the God claim is true? That's the question.
Yeah, nice muting it at homes there. I actually asked my question first. Now you
Okay,
can.
I'm going to drop you. Goodbye. If you're going to sit there and go, nice muting and ad homs, there was no ad hom. I was suggesting, and by the way, an ad hom, an attack on the person, is only a fallacy if I say you're wrong because you're a prick. If I just say you're a prick, then I'm not engaged in an ad hom fallacy. I'm just making an ad hom. But when I say that it's getting very difficult to take you seriously, it's because it's getting very difficult to take you seriously. Because having done this for 20 years and sitting here calmly, repeatedly answering your questions honestly and straightforwardly, and then injecting questions in order to try to get to a point of clarity, when you keep coming back with whatever nervous laughter while you kind of smugly suggest, oh, nice, nice ramble there or whatever. Glad you read this. Nobody needs your commentary on this. What we need is for you to actually step up and present a defense of the God that you actually advocate for. So if you'd like to call back sometime and say, hi, I'm Joshua. It didn't go that well last time I called. I'd like to defend the notion that there is a creator God that is triomni and self-revelatory. I'd be happy to say, cool. For clarity, triomni is often used, or it's occasionally used in place of omnimax or whatever. And so I wouldn't want to leave it just at triomni. I'd want you to say which of the omni characteristics you're actually advocating for. And then when you say that something's self-revelatory, are you suggesting that it's properly basic, that it is that it is axiomatic, or that the evidence for this is evident in the facts of nature, or that the abstract concept is somehow, as I was saying before, properly basic? But if all you're going to do is do a sort of Howard Cosell play-by-play of mocking what you think is going on, you're not going to ever have a good conversation here. You are not going to be a good representative of theism or your God. You are going to look embarrassingly foolish. And there's no reason for that. Wouldn't it have been better for you to actually have a conversation that results in somebody gaining new information and potentially an understanding of the God that you're advocating for? I mean, I realize that I've already hung up on you. But, I'm better at this than you are.
It's also worth noting that his extremely obviously fake Michigan accent, his IP address is coming out of California, so he was already coming in on a lie that you all couldn't see, that we were aware of. When he's trying to frame this, Matt's not answering my question thing, it's like, yeah, because you're starting off from a lie.
You don't get to frame it as Matt's not answering your question when Matt is robustly answering every question that you've asked. And when I ask a question in return, you act smug and dismissive and don't actually get to that thing. So congratulations. If you wanted to get hung up on, if that was your kink, you succeeded. I got a couple calls here. We don't have any of the theistic calls right now, but there is one that's actually being screened. But I want to make sure we take some of these atheist callers that have been waiting patiently. Omega Weapon, pronouns he, him in New York. You're on the Hang Up with Matt.
Oh, hi, Matt. Nice to talk to you. Can you hear me okay?
I can. It says here you've got a syllogism that could possibly falsify the Abrahamic God And that sentence is very confusing. So why don't I just shut up and you tell me what you've got and then tell me what it is.
Well, for a while now, I've been trying to come up with something in maybe like a rough syllogistic form that could possibly, I'm not saying definitely, could disprove the Abrahamic God if it is described in a certain way. Because I know this doesn't work for, gods that are, described sort of nebulously and, unfalsifiable. But I believe, and, I obviously want your critique on this. If I have it correct, I was just wanted to get your thoughts, maybe see where I'm wrong, or any suggestions you might have, basically. I can start whenever you'd like.
Tell me the specifics of the God that your syllogism addresses and then present it.
Okay. Well, I would say most, maybe not all people, would describe the Abrahamic God as like the last caller asserted, the creator or the cause of the universe, something that is beyond quotation space-time or space-time independent.
Okay.
And that's pretty much my
Are those the only features of the God that are required for your syllogism to kind of debunk?
Yes. So thus far.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, so that was basically premise one. If this God is described as space-time independent and the creator causer of the universe. Premise two, to even say that something exists means it has location in space-time or is space-time itself. This is supported by both logic and all the verifiable cosmology we have, including everything we use to identify something that is extant in reality. Premise three, creation and causation, biological and cosmological necessarily require space-time to already be there and to happen in the first place and be coherent. I mean, I don't see how an act of creation or a cause can logically be without time or space. Therefore, conclusion, if the Abrahamic God is defined in such a way, it cannot logically exist.
Yeah, I've probably said this 5,000 times.
Okay.
Yeah, your syllogism here says that basically, if someone is saying that God exists independent of space and time, what does it mean for something to exist independent of time? You don't even need to worry about the space thing. If something exists for 0 seconds, how is that? Isn't that logically identical to it not existing? Because a thing that doesn't exist exists for 0 time, and a thing that exists outside of time is logically identical to something that doesn't exist. You don't even have to go into the creation causation thing, but you can say that if that's a part of it. It's like you took two different arguments and put them together. One is that it's an absurdity to say that something exists outside of space-time. We don't know what that means, and we really can't know what that means. And also, it's absurd to say that something could create something absent time, as creation is a process of doing, and doing is an action, and action involves time. It makes no sense to say there's an action outside of time. So yeah, this is kind of a merging together of a couple of objections to God that we've talked about over the years. Sure.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you hearing me out.
Sure.
There's also like one other thing that I guess could be attached to it. It's not as possibly rock solid logically as I like to be, but it's a thought I've had a lot that occurs with people that claim this type of God exists. And one of it is a lot of people will say this is like a perfect being, and to me, the word perfect means maximized in every conceivable way. Like, it's completely homogeneous. It shouldn't have any needs or wants, completely self-sustaining, and if it is described as such, then why would it have a want or even a need to create anything in the first place, much less require glorification from its creations?
Yep, we've done that one loads of times too.
Okay.
The bigger problem is that if the very assertion that God is perfect
Mhm.
is almost meaningless, because I think all of us would acknowledge that we are all imperfect. We are, and at a minimum, just looking at it from a cognitive standpoint, we are all imperfect thinkers. And is it possible for an imperfect being to properly conceive of perfection? And I would argue that it's not, that we are only ever approximating a guess at perfection. And so when you say, if there was a perfect being, it would be homogeneous, I don't know what the justification is for that. And you and I would both have to acknowledge that even if you and I agreed that a perfect being would be homogeneous, that as imperfect beings, every declaration we make about a perfect being is dubious at best. And so when you have a whole bunch of imperfect beings trying to discuss what a perfect being would be like, the only thing we can be confident in is that we're probably going to be wrong. And so what we would need is for the perfect being to come down and, matter of fact, this is tied to the video that I just released on Monday about whether or not God can communicate clearly. So yeah, it might be worth watching. But yeah, the notion that
Yeah.
why would a perfect being want or need to create anything? I've mentioned this before. Why would God create anything? And there are answers to that, by the way, that theists of different stripes will give. Like, well, it's just out of an abundance of love of wanting to share reality with someone else. That this perfect love inspires a God to create in order to share, and that he loves you enough to allow freedom, which is why the world is, fallen and sinful and blah, blah, blah. But all of it, every single one of those answers is us making up things about a being rather than any demonstration that the being exists and that we have an understanding of it. So yeah, they're all flawed, but cool.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate it. I've looked up to you for years. You've helped me with a lot. I don't want to give you, too much, overload you with compliments here, but I really appreciate all the work that you've done for the atheist community in general, and I won't take up any more of your time. It was nice chatting with you.
Thanks, Omega Weapon. Yeah, keep going. I mean, they're on those lines. I've got a couple theistic callers I'm going to get to here. I'm going to take them. I think I'm going to take them in the order that they came in. But one of the problems is that if I'm the one that's doing this, I don't have time to necessarily read everything and talk to everybody all the time. I appreciate the fact that not only people calling in, but we're getting theist callers to call in. Hopefully we get some good conversations, and hopefully somebody's actually able to demonstrate something about what they believe in and why. And the why is the most important part. And it's only important why they believe if in fact their reasons for believing should apply to other people. If somebody says, hey Matt, do you believe that we have common ancestry with the other great apes on the planet? My answer is yes. And so, okay, what's your reason for that? Because I accept the scientific evidence of common descent, everything from the fusing of chromosome 2 to the fossil record and other homologous traits that we have. The evidence is sufficient to warrant that. If in fact I had said, oh, I believe that we have common ancestry because I just do, or because I have, it's been privately revealed to me, or anything like that, the question is no longer about why should I believe or why do I believe, but why should others believe? And so we're trying to constantly work towards a world where if we assume that we all share a reality, then the facts of that reality are independent of our subjective opinions of them. And so if in fact there's a God, that's true or false, independent of what I think or what I believe. But whether or not I have warrant to believe in a God is not independent of the facts and evidence and my epistemology. But let's see how we do. We have Anthony in New York is a theist who believes God exists, and I guess wants my explanation that he doesn't, which I think we may be shifting the burden of proof right off the bat, but I'll let you go into it. Anthony, how you doing?
Hi, Matt. Matt, it's weird. It's like you are a hero of mine, even though I disagree with you. I think you're brilliant. I really think you're a good guy, but I just think you're wrong. And I just want to tell you my experience. Right? I know all the arguments. You know, the universe coming from nothing. It's fine-tuned. How did life start? The probability of evolution, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, fulfilled prophecies. I know all that, right? But I want to tell you my own personal experience. There was a 2 or 3 year period where God was showing me the supernatural. Now you would think, okay, that's just a claim. You're hallucinating. Maybe you should go, see a psychologist or whatever. But there are things that happen with these visions and these angels that were appearing that I had other people witnessing. The first time I've seen something, I was in the bedroom, right, and I just had a little fight with my wife. It just shows you how this is God's grace. And I'm about, we've got the covers on me, and all of a sudden this white ball of light appeared in the middle of the room, and there was a man in the center of it. That was the first time, right? And then after that I was seeing things like weekly, and then
Okay.
there was a time. All right, but can I finish this? I just wanted to say one more thing.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Now my son, this is when he was like, I don't know, maybe like 13 years old. He's a police officer now, but I was seeing balls of fire in my room, right? So I said, Anthony, come inside and pray with me. I feel the Holy Spirit. I didn't want to tell him I was seeing anything because if this was a hallucination, I wanted to know. I wanted to know if am I going crazy or if these things are real. So we're in the room and I see a ball of fire and I don't say nothing to him. And then as soon as the ball of fire appears and disappears, he says, Dad, I saw a ball of fire. And I start questioning about it. Where was it? What color was it? And then he explained to me exactly what we both saw. We both saw it. I saw it with my wife at one time. And I saw it with my wife a couple times, actually. And then my son, I saw it one time. Then I'm in the car, right? And I'm not even thinking about God or nothing. I'm getting ready to turn on my car. I hear popping noises. And I look over to my right shoulder, and I see these gold particles appear and exploding like little fireworks. So, like, to me, I've seen the supernatural, so it's real, and that goes with my worldview of everything else with Bible predictions that came true. But if this is a hallucination, how are all of us seeing the same thing at the same time? Like the disciples, they saw the same thing at the same time.
You ready?
Hello? Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you for listening to me.
Sure. So I took all kinds of notes during that. You started by saying you just think I'm wrong. At some point, we might get back to that, so you can tell me what I'm actually wrong about. I don't know how I can be wrong on the God thing. But you say that God's been showing you the supernatural. How do you know that what you witnessed was supernatural?
Well, just like I know everything in this world, life experience, I've seen trees, I've seen people, I've seen airplanes, I've seen animals, I've seen the insects world, and then I've seen something appear from nowhere in my bedroom, and you just, this is not of this world. It's not there, and all of a sudden...
Anthony, is it possible for somebody to think that something is supernatural and for them to be wrong about it?
Okay, but do you have any other explanations? Because
that's not what I'm at.
worldview with
Anthony, I listen to you. I'm asking specific questions. I'm going to get to your constant, hey, do you have another explanation? I'll get to that in a minute. But the question is it possible for somebody to think that something they experienced was supernatural and for them to be wrong about it?
Yeah, I'm sure that happens all the time, like UFOs, and they don't, it's not a UFO.
I got it. It's just a yes or no question. Second question.
Yes.
How do you tell the difference between when they're right and when they're not right?
Well, if I'm in my room and I'm praying to God, I'm going to use all my experience and all my common sense, and I'm going to make the best decision based on what I know. Now, since there's no other explanation of what else it could be.
No,
aliens.
You don't get to do that.
But
So,
what would be the best explanation?
No. So first of all, I don't give a crap about abductive arguments to the best explanation because we may not know enough. I'm dealing with this raw as a skeptic. And that is, you are claiming that you experienced something that is supernatural. If all you mean is you experienced something that you don't have a natural explanation for, I'm willing to accept that and we can move on. If you mean that it's actually supernatural, you're going to have to prove that it's supernatural. So do you mean that you just don't have a natural explanation for it, or do you mean that it is in fact supernatural?
I believe it's rational for me to believe that this was supernatural from God based on my experience and my knowledge of my knowledge.
And I don't.
Okay.
And I don't. And since you're not answering the question, I don't know what to do with it.
Well, it's like, I would like you, like people that are listening to us, what could it have been if it was not God showing me the other dimension that is all around us?
Anthony, this is a logical fallacy. It is a logical fallacy, argument from ignorance, to suggest that your explanation stands until somebody disproves it. That's not the way proof works. That's not the way evidence works. And that's not the way logical explanations work. The issue here is, if you just said, I have these experiences, I don't have a natural explanation for them, we could move on. But you've claimed that they are in fact supernatural. And I'm asking you, how do you confirm that they're supernatural? And all you've said is, based on your experience and common sense, you can't think of another explanation. Therefore, you're going to go with supernatural. And that is literally a logical fallacy.
Okay, but I think either I'm wrong that it was supernatural or I'm right. And since it came from nowhere and I'm praying in the name of Jesus.
How do you know where it came from and why? How do you, hang on, how do you know where it came from and why does praying in the name of Jesus make any difference about where a ball of light came from?
Because everything, like the universe too came from something that is supernatural, right? There wasn't nature to make the universe.
Sorry, Anthony, but I asked a specific question that gets to the foundation of empirical research and epistemology here. And your assertions that the universe required a supernatural starter is not only irrelevant completely to this part of the discussion, but it's also yet another assertion that you would need to back up. I'm saying, if you experience a ball of light, how do you know that it came from nothing? And how do you know the fact that you were praying to Jesus is relevant to that ball of light?
Because it's like it goes, it follows, like two follow, goes after one.
Anthony, I hate to do this. Please tell me that you're being serious, because literally what you've done is started with an argument from ignorance, started with and continued with shifting the burden of proof, and now you are engaged in one of the most popular fallacies, post hoc ergo propter hoc, after this, therefore because of this. And you're correlating the fact that you're praying to Jesus and experienced something and saying that must mean they're connected. That is literally another fallacy. You have yet to spew more than 2 or 3 sentences without engaging in a logical fallacy. So let's pause for a second. Do you understand the problem of logical fallacies? That when you use a logical fallacy, it doesn't mean your conclusion is wrong. It just means we cannot know that it's correct. You understand that part?
I cannot prove that this is supernatural, but if we had a jury... right?
Okay, I'm going to mute you. I literally just asked you a question, an incredibly important question, about your understanding of logical fallacies. You completely ignored that question and went on to talk about whether or not you can prove that it's supernatural. Set all of that aside and focus on the question that I'm going to ask you. Do you understand that a logically fallacious argument doesn't mean that your conclusion is false, but it means that we cannot be warranted in believing that the conclusion is true? Do you understand that that's what a fallacy means?
Okay, so you're saying that it may be true, what I'm saying, that this could be supernatural. Are you acknowledging that?
I don't know if it could be supernatural or not. I'm talking in the abstract. That's why I said set aside everything and listen to what I'm saying. I'm asking a specific question about your understanding of logical fallacies. And here's the fact, undeniable fact. A logically fallacious argument, the conclusion of a logically fallacious argument cannot be assessed as either true or false. It is dubious. Do you understand that?
I understand, but listen, Matt.
No.
let me
There's
see
not
this for
a
a
there's
reason.
not a but. There's not a but. Listen.
But Matt, you can't.
There's not
you
a
can't,
but.
like, just put
Listen.
me in a
There's
battle.
not a.
You
There's not a
gotta let
but.
me.
Anthony. Okay, I'm going to mute you again. Anthony, I'm desperately trying to turn this call into something that's potentially useful for you and for everybody else. Logically fallacious arguments are useless. If you present a logically fallacious argument, we have no way of telling if your conclusion is true or if your conclusion is false. If the argument is fallacious, your argument is useless. And so I'm asking specific questions about your claims, about how do you know it's supernatural? How do you know that whether or not you were praying to Jesus was relevant? How do you know that it was God showing you the supernatural? How does having a fight with your wife demonstrate that this was God's grace? How does the fact that somebody else saw it demonstrate that it was supernatural or anything? All of these are important questions. But if you can't answer with something that is not fallacious, then if all of your answers are fallacy, then they're all useless. So we don't need to go on unless we get to this point where we understand that we're going to need you to present evidence in an argument that isn't fallacious. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I understand that, Matt. But I'm just a layman, and I'm just telling you my experience. And I'm going to go away believing what I believe in. And what are you going to take from this? You're going to just take that as something that happened. Wait a minute. Or
you're going to go away believing what you believe. So you're going to end this conversation believing exactly what you believed at the beginning, no matter what I say, right?
Yeah, I think if God shows you the supernatural and you see it.
Goodbye. I don't need to talk to you. Anybody who's going to come in here and say, I believe in God. I believe in the supernatural. I believe I've had these experiences. I believe God's showing me this. And every single question I ask about how you determine that it's God, how you determine that it's supernatural, you argue with the fallacy. And you're like, but what other explanation is there? I'm about to get to your question. I've already hung up on Anthony. I'm going to get to Anthony's question about, is there another explanation? But if you're going to call in and assert that you are going to leave believing the exact same thing that you believed at the beginning of the conversation, no matter what I say, don't call. I have no patience for closed-minded people. And closed-minded people who are so confused that they argue every single point fallaciously and then try to shift the burden of proof, which is the biggest fallacy. It's not worth having a conversation. You have no idea. I have lots of notes here. God was showing you the supernatural, visions and angels witnessed by others. The first time was after a fight with your wife, which shows God grace. What an absurd claim. How the fuck does that show God's grace? What does that have to do with God's grace? The fact that you had this after your wife, but you saw a ball of light and a man in the center of it. And then your son, who was about 13 at the time, you asked him to come in and pray with you. And he says he saw a ball of light too. Cool. I don't know whether or not your story is true. I'm happy to accept that there's something going on. We've heard other stories like this. But the fact, whether or not I have an alternate explanation is irrelevant. Whether or not anybody has an alternate explanation is irrelevant. The issue isn't, can we give you something other than it was God? The issue is, can you demonstrate that it was God? That's like saying, I found a dead body in the house. I'm convinced the butler did it. Do you have any other theories? And my response is, I don't need any other theories. The burden of proof is on you to show that the butler did it. If you can't show that the butler did it, then we don't get to conclude that the butler did it, whether the butler did it or not. And if I'm unable to show that the gardener did it, or the husband did it, or the nephew did it, or a random wandering person did it, if I'm unable to show that any of those are true or more likely, that doesn't mean that your hypothesis about the butler doing it is correct. There's a reason I ask the questions that I ask. If you had an experience that you don't have an explanation for, fine. There's lots of those. And we could have a conversation about, hey, this was a really weird experience. What do you think it was? I don't know. Have you gone to see a doctor? Have you, but why would I need a doctor if it's just, my son saw it too. Maybe your son has the same medical condition you do. Maybe there's an environmental factor in your house. Maybe there's a gas leak, or maybe there's a trick of the light. I don't know, because I wasn't there. If your position is that you experience something, and now until somebody gives you an explanation, you're going to believe that it was supernatural, and you're going to believe that it's God, and you're going to stick with that, then you are, by definition, irrational, not a good skeptic, not a good critical thinker, and your epistemology is flawed such that you are willing to accept things that aren't necessarily true as if they are true. The fact of the matter, Anthony, is you don't have to reach a conclusion about what you experienced, but you did. And when you reach a conclusion about what you experienced, you've now adopted the burden of proof. The second you say it is supernatural, the second you say it's from God, the second you say the fact that I was praying to Jesus means that it's tied to Jesus, all of the fact that you say that, it was after a fight with your wife, which shows God's grace, every single one of those claims that you made adopts a burden of proof. And you can't meet it by your own admission. You just keep going, I don't know what else it could be. I don't know what else it could be. Congratulations, that's a fallacy. And if you don't care, and you are like, well, I'm going to keep believing what I believe, why even call? Why waste anybody's time? What a weird show this would be if we were just like, I got to start this just in case there's a clip cut out here. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Hang Up. It's another Wednesday night where I'm going to sit here and let people tell their weird stories of things that happen in their life and not challenge them at all, because the burden of proof isn't on them. They just get to say whatever they want to say. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. It's ridiculous. Now, Anthony, if you want to try again, you're welcome to call back. But if you're just going to make fallacious claims, and you're just going to say that you're going to be closed-minded, and you're just going to expect somebody to prove you're wrong, that's not going to work. We don't currently know why the universe exists. We don't know why there's something rather than nothing. There are theists who think it's because of God did it. Somebody else might say that it's a multiverse. If I say, I believe that the universe exists because universe farting pixies that exist in another meta dimension got together one day and said, let's fart out this particular universe. And my claim is untestable, unfalsifiable. I've made a claim that adopts a burden of proof. And if I were to say to you, what other explanation is there? What are you going to say? Is your other explanation God did it? What makes that explanation more plausible? Can you demonstrate that there's a God? Are you providing any evidence for it? And if so, then we didn't need to have the first part of the conversation. You could just say, I have evidence for a God. Unfortunately, the other theist caller that we were waiting to get to evidently ran away. I guess me sitting here and calmly asking questions is just too much for some people to answer or to handle. So let's go on to some other atheist callers. Ike in North Carolina phones to him. How do I deal with existential despair after realizing there's no afterlife and my religion lied to me? Wow, Ike, that's heavy. You want to tell me what's going on?
Hey, yeah, kind of just what it says on the tin, several months back, I had you know how everybody talks about spiritual experiences and you rebut with the super strawberry example? I kind of saw the super strawberry, not literally, I didn't see a strawberry, but I had this sort of divine euphoric moment with certain chemicals. And when it was over, I just felt this great emptiness, and I realized that, because I was raised Pentecostal, and so speaking in tongues and Holy Spirit, and
Sure.
and when I had that experience, it just sort of burned the belief out of me, and I long since sort of lost my faith in Christianity, but I've since just lost any belief in anything supernatural.
Yeah.
And it just kind of, it's fucked with me for a minute. Pardon my language. I'm sorry.
No, you can fucking say fuck as much as you fucking want on my fucking show, because I don't
Cool.
have magical
Fantastic.
thinking about giving words fucking special secret fucking power, whatever phoneme. I know people are gonna be, oh, it's just so. Now, granted, I do this kind of as a joke, because Arden and I were watching Gen V, which is a spinoff of The Boys, and our biggest complaint about Gen V is that it oftentimes feels like it was written by a 14-year-old that's just gotten kind of permission to say fuck or gotten out from underneath mom and dad's thumb and decides they're going to say fuck as much as possible, just in ways that don't always make sense. So anyway, do you have atheist secular friends that you get to interact with, any kind of community at all?
No, not really. I've always I have not religious friends, but very spiritual friends. My partner is a practicing witch, and various flavors of cafeteria Christianity, which is the whole thing that I even use that phrase. But I don't really know any atheists. I don't know anyone who doesn't believe in a supernatural.
I would say
I live
that,
deep in the woods.
Oh, well, you live where I'd almost kind of want to live, as long as I could get, Google Fiber out there. But let me say a couple things.
Oh God, no, we have satellite.
Oh yeah, that wouldn't work for what I do. But let me say a few things about what you're going through. First of all, as always, I'm going to recommend that you reach out to recoveringfromreligion.org, because if you don't have people to talk to, there's at least a chat thing where you can chat with someone about the things you're struggling with. I will say that the existential dread that some people feel, particularly once they find out they don't have a good reason to believe there's an afterlife, and in fact, I'd argue we have very good reason to think that there's no such thing as a soul, and that pretty much kills the idea of an afterlife dead. It feels a lot like, I've used the example before of where, you were promised that you were going to become a billionaire at 30, and then you got to 30 and you found out that everybody was lying. And people expect that to not be a big deal. It's a big deal, especially if you've already been acting and spending money as if you were getting ready to be a billionaire. It could be a devastating deal. And so if you've been living your life as if, things can wait for an afterlife, and then you find out that they can't, that can be a very big deal. It also isn't just a potential big deal in that sense, but you've been living up to a point of thinking, I'm going to see my loved ones again. Although, to be fair, I mean, most of us that grew up Christian thought we were going to see all of our loved ones again, but somewhere underneath we were like, some of our loved ones are going to end up in hell, and we're probably not going to see them. And none of us thought we were going to hell. But could be. And so I get where you're coming from with this existential despair, but I would say that give it some time. It does become slightly more comfortable, but I'm really pragmatic about where and how I want to spend my effort and energy. And so if I don't think I have any chance of changing something or fixing something, I'm really good at not spending much more time on it. And since I don't see any way to do anything or learn anything right away that's going to give me information about an afterlife, every second that I spend worrying about an afterlife or the absence of an afterlife or mourning the loss of an afterlife is a second that I've wasted from the only life I know I'm going to get. And I don't know how long this life's going to be.
Yeah.
I've had triple bypass. I'm healthier than I've been in 30 years. Blood pressure's great. Everything's going awesome. But I could get hit by a bus tomorrow.
Glad to hear
I
that.
could drop dead from another heart attack tonight. And so with the knowledge that that's a possibility, and with the knowledge that I've had several relatives that lived to be over 100. I'm 55 right now. I've probably lived more than half my life. The odds are incredibly good that more than half of my life is in the past. And in much the same way that I could sit here and go, man, it sucks. I thought I was going to get an afterlife. I was going to get an afterlife. Oh gosh. And now this means that, and this means, in the same way that I could sit here and struggle with that, I could also, from a purely secular standpoint, setting aside afterlives, go, God, I'm 55. I could start on a midlife crisis where more than half my life is behind me now. And what have I got to show for it? And, I'm never going to get to retire. I could go through all the things that are wrong with my life. And unless there's some practical path to potentially fixing those issues, as I did by having heart surgery, unless there's a path to fixing them, then every instant I spend worrying about them is an instant wasted. And I know that on its own is not enough to overcome the dread, but maybe keeping that in the back of your mind while you also you also give yourself time and realize you're not the first person to feel this. You're not the 1,000th person to feel this. You're not the 20,000th person to feel this today. This is common. And it's one of the reasons that I recommend people try to find an atheist community where they can interact with people. If you need to do it online, do it online. If you need it to be recovering from religion chats, do it that way. If you need to sneak out for an atheist convention, the American Atheist Annual Convention, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, any number of things like that, just as a getaway, anything where you're not alone. Because that currently is the biggest problem with being a secularist, especially if you live out in the middle of nowhere like you do, not having a community, not having people to interact with. It makes the loneliness and the concern and the existential dread and the nihilism and anything else that's creeping in, it makes it all worse because you get in your head because you can't have the conversations with people to say, it does in fact get better. The It Gets Better campaign, it applies to a lot of things and it's really difficult for people to believe it. But genuinely, we know that it's the case. We know that grief dissipates, doesn't have to go away, but it doesn't have to control your life. We know, from psychologically speaking, the things that you're dealing with and struggling with are in fact going to get easier. I mean, it's virtually a certainty that over the next 5 to 10 years, your view on it's going to change and it won't be as traumatizing.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm going to go because you got callers, but before I go, what you said, it kind of reminded me of what my papa used to say. He'd say, if you have a problem, fix it. If you don't, or if you can't fix it, why are you bitching?
Yeah. It's a pragmatic thing, and I'm happy to be compared to somebody's papa, especially as I'm sitting here with a gray papa beard.
All right. You take care.
You too, Ike, and take care of
Have
yourself.
fun.
Yeah. Try.
And
I don't need to say anymore. You got it.
Yeah. Sisyphus is happy. All right.
Cheers, man.
Take care. Have fun.
You'll do fine. Oh, all right. Oh my gosh. Jimmy sent a photo.
It's
Texas
not relevant to the show.
It's not relevant to the show. Texas is the worst state for mental health care, Forbes advisor finds. This is the second time in 2 years that Texas is top Forbes advisors list for worst states for mental health care. It might almost be a little bit close to relevant to the show, in the sense that I'm in Texas and I may not have very good health care with regard to mental health stuff. Hooray. We're going to get back to callers here in just a minute. I want to do one thing that I promised real quick. So, Lewis and Bill, you guys are on hold. I'll get to both of you. I promise. I know Lewis has been waiting for a while, but I want to read a portion of the prelude for David's new book so that when we do get David back on, some of you will already have a good understanding of what the book's generally about. So here's the first couple pages of the prelude. Pre-human religion, pre-religion, 2 million years ago. Do animals have religious impulses? Perhaps the ancient Greek philosopher Xenophanes of Colophon wasn't far off, and I probably butchered that. Thank you, David, for throwing that in at the beginning. Wasn't far off when he gently mocked the belief that our gods were just exalted versions of our human selves. Quote, the Ethiops say that their gods are flat-nosed and black, while Thracians say theirs have blue eyes and red hair. Yet if cattle or horses or lions had hands and could draw and could sculpt like men, then the horses would draw their gods like horses and cattle like cattle, and each they would shape bodies of gods in the likeness, each kind of their own. Humans, after all, are animals. Perhaps it's not so strange to suppose that animals might have similar religious impulses. Could horses be venerating Pegasus, or cattle some kind of Super Bowl? Could lions be worshiping their own version of Aslan? The short answer appears to be no. But the slightly more involved answer appears to be no, but cross-pollination between multiple fields and subfields of science, anthropology, archaeology, biology, ethology, primatology, psychology, sociology, to zoology, and more are leading to fascinating developments in the study of religion and providing a fuller, richer picture of its origin and ongoing evolution through time, including how evolution of human religion reaches back to well before we were human. Researchers have long observed intriguing behavior in animals that reflect a richer inner life than suspected. It's been well established that many species, ranging from elephants, wolves, whales, orcas, and dolphins, crows and ravens, and primates, all exhibit grief and loss at the death of a child, mate, or parent. To the extent that some researchers contend their behavior rises above mere instinct to qualify as actual funeral rites. For instance, James B. Harrod makes, quote, the case for chimpanzee religion in the Journal for the Study of Religion, Nature, and Culture, noting that chimpanzees, both wild and captive, mark the death of a troop member with what are arguably highly ritualized behaviors. Hours of group or individual silence are followed by solemn visitation by the troop members who gaze at and groom the corpse and make distinctive displays and vocalizations, lamentation-like whimpers or hooting calls of distress. In her book, Evolving God, biological anthropologist Barbara King explains that non-human primates, like our closest relatives, chimpanzees and bonobos, are not religious. That said, all primates do exhibit characteristics that fostered the evolution of religion in their human cousins. Traits like empathy and the need for belongingness, meaning-making and communication, rule-following and imagination. What's more, simply by virtue of being social animals, we and similar species evolved survival mechanisms that in humans would go on to contribute to religion. It's not hard to see how the benefits of being part of an altruistic group could outweigh the benefits of individuals going it alone. Being part of a team improves the chances of finding food, surviving injuries and sickness, successfully taking down larger dangerous prey, and defending the group from outside attack. Those benefits come at a cost, however. As Dutch primatologist Frans de Waal notes, all social animals have hierarchical societies. Each member knows its own place and has to step up or rein in their behavior to make living in the group feasible. Certain rules of expected behavior maintain the social order, and dominant group members enforce that order through punishment. So naturally, in primate societies, pre-moral sentiments evolved to help restrain the selfishness of individuals and to foster a more cooperative group. I'll stop there as we have callers here. And by the way, as a reminder, since I haven't done this reminder, I'm going to be reading all the super chats, $5 or more from tonight's show, just as soon as we're done with all the callers. And, once again, going through the list of shows coming up this week. Tomorrow's Transatlantic Call-In Show starts at 2 with Arden and Josie. Sunday show at 2 p.m. is Forrest and Eric, and the Sunday show after dark is Paulogia and John Gleason. Skeptalk on Mondays, John and Dr. Aron Adair. Tuesdays, Chewed Gums, Eve and Alyssa. And next Wednesday's Hang-Ups, myself and Derek from Myth Vision. Let's move on to Lewis. Is that
Hello?
in Minnesota, I think?
Yep, that is correct. Minneapolis.
Awesome. What's going on, Lewis? How can I help? Appreciate you calling.
Yeah, and I know that when I listen to the show, you guys tend to prefer these callers because they provide the most stuff to talk about. But I would say, an atheist. I guess I said when I was being screened, I said that I'm closer to the atheist side of things on the spectrum. I grew up a religious person in Southern Africa, and so it took me years to sort of outgrow that conditioning. And I guess when I looked at the prompt, it said, can one's religious belief be justified? And what I think, based on my upbringing and what I've seen in people around me in that particular part of the world, it can in fact be justified, because for a lot of them, and this is kind of dangerous because I don't want to say that people in my position have obviously been lucky enough to go to college and go to graduate school and so on. I don't want to say that I'm better at making sense of the world and being able to exist without the crash that is religion. But I think that there are people in the world where they just don't have the tools. And I guess that's my argument. In those particular cases, someone in like Southern Africa that's not been privileged enough to go to school and be able to develop their reasoning skills to untangle what they've been conditioned to believe. In those cases, it seems to me, in my experiences dealing with those people and having been one of those people in the past, that it may be justified to let them, believe what they believe while they're around. It helps them make sense of the world. And then at some point, my hope is that over time, as people get more educated within my region, it will become easier for the ideas of, basically it will become easier to deconstruct religion over there, because I've seen that it really, while it gives people's lives meaning, it makes it so much easier for them to be oppressed by leaders, and just to not, in general, it just makes it a lot harder for people to progress in life and achieve greater self-actualization, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying that it's understandable why people are religious. But are you suggesting that it sounds like you're saying that it's justifiable to act and be and participate in a religion for practical and pragmatic benefits, but I don't think you're saying that it's justified to believe that the religion's actually true, right?
No, I don't. I'm not going to argue for that. I guess what I'm trying to say is that some of us have the intellectual capacity to comprehend the things that make it easier for us to say, okay, that does make sense. That does make sense. And then there are people who just don't.
I have pushed back every time somebody says that thing. Basically what you're saying, and I don't think you're trying to be cruel about it, but when you say people don't have the intellectual capacity to understand, it almost sounds like you're saying some people are so stupid they need religion, but not me. And I worry that that's the way it comes off, because
no, I know, and yeah, I know, and I'm trying not to come out this way, but I don't think it's necessarily about stupidity. I think that it's just about conditioning. I'm going to use myself as an example. I grew up in Southern Africa. I managed to, through education, move over to the United States about 14 years ago now, and when you come from a place where you really have very little exposure to the outside world, and all you've ever known is one way of thinking. If someone brings a different, if I go to my mom, for example, who's quite religious, and I say, this thing that you believe does make sense. And I gave her reason, like all the reasons that I have for not believing that the supernatural or a God exists. My experience is that without a certain level of literacy or education, that conversation is really, really hard and in some cases impossible. So it's not necessarily that they are stupid. It's that there has to be some foundational concepts that they have been exposed to that make it easier for them to deconstruct whatever conditioning that they may find themselves existing under, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yes, and my only concern is when we say that there are people who need religion. It's just true that being a part of religion, being associated with religion, generally provides benefits. Doesn't matter whether the religion's true or not. There's benefits to being in the group. In the reading that I just did from David's book, we touched on that even from our primate ancestors. So there's a general benefit to being a part of a group, and religions create those groups specifically with those benefits. I don't want us to be saying there are people who need religion in any sense more than religions have created a need for themselves. But I think that what people need in order to free themselves from religion is, first of all, permission. And I don't mean that in the sense of, here's a top-down, I grant you permission to stop believing. I mean the permission that they give themselves, because religions set up protective mechanisms such that doubt is a sin, questioning is a sin, not being a part of the religious group is a sin, and even if it weren't necessarily a sin against God, you would be ostracized by that community. You'll find yourself on the outs with the community. And so it's entirely set up to thwart all of the ways that people might push back and find a way to escape. So merely saying, making people aware that one option is to say, I'm not convinced of that, or I'm convinced it's false. That those are options, because I've genuinely over the years had people come to me and say, yes, part of my brain knew that there were people who didn't believe in God, but despite that, it never felt like an option. It never felt like, oh, I can do that. It's like there's something completely broken with the people who are, God's given them over to reprobate mind. Basically, religions like Christianity have poisoned the thought process on this so much by making doubting Thomas the example of, oh, we should all believe even though we haven't seen. It makes sense that people don't ever try to get out of a comforting community and situation. Like, I live in a house that I've lived in since for 11 years. I could have sold it a year or so ago when it was worth even more than it is now. But the hassle of moving, of doing all the work and the paperwork to sell my house, then go find another place to live, pack up all my stuff, pay somebody to move it to a new place, all of these things, it's just easier to stay here. You don't even have to be lazy to come to that conclusion. It's just like you're doing a cost benefit analysis right now, while I could have made more money off my house a year and a half ago. It's the cost benefit analysis for what I want. It's not worth it to move right now. It's the same thing with religion. The cost benefit analysis on most religions, you take people like Fitzgerald and myself, who are both Southern Baptists. If I stay a Southern Baptist, everywhere I move, at least in the United States, if not elsewhere, there's a church. There's a Southern Baptist church, probably within a couple of miles of me. If I'm living anywhere near civilization. If I'm out with Ike, you might have to drive a bit farther to get to a Southern Baptist church, but boom, there's a ready-made community right there. And if that's true, and I enjoy going, and I have friends and family there, and I benefit from my connections to that community, I have a business in the community, I make connections through that church. The church helps promote that. It's like, hey, do you know a mechanic? Yes, here's a mechanic that goes to my church. Hey, do you know somebody who breeds snakes? Yes, here's somebody who breeds snakes that goes to my church. That's one way of increasing business, everything else. All of the benefits that come with being a part of an organized religion and a religious community, that's a lot to overcome. And so most people don't even consider it an option. And until it is an option, they're unlikely to challenge those things. There are very few people who actually genuinely sit down and take stock of what they believe and why, and doing a reevaluation on their life. So yeah, I'm in agreement, Lewis.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I guess where I suppose I have a little bit of a different take is that I agree to an extent that for sure people need the permission within themselves to start to consider the fact, the possibility that this is not the only way, that there may be other ways of seeing the world and living their lives. But I think where I think there's a little bit of a difference between the society that I live in now, the Western world, and the society that I grew up in, is that I think there's maybe like a maturity within the society. Like if you think of ideology, the ideology of religion and other competing ideologies, there's a lot more competing ideologies in the West that are a little bit more mature and ready to be like someone for example, in the US who chooses to remain religious. I am much more likely to accuse them of choosing to do that for comfort, and they might say that it allows them to keep a sense of community or these other benefits you've just mentioned. But in most cases, they have in fact been exposed to different ways of thinking over time, whether they chose to explore those or they didn't. But chances are they have come across different ideologies that if they wanted to sit down and actually weigh things up, they might find that it exists for them. And then there are people in the world who just have never been able to access that kind of knowledge well, so to speak. So I'd say what I would hope and what I want for the third world, to use a phrase, is for over time, these knowledge or these different ideologies that can challenge religion, they need to be allowed in those spaces, and they have not been allowed to the extent that they should. So that if you allow them, it's still going to take time, and the time that it's going to take for it to mature enough to where people can really see it as an option is quite long. And I think that people who are maybe adults at this point, they may not have the privilege to exist in that environment by the time it's ready for them to actually access it. If that makes sense. Again, it's kind of like, it does kind of go back to having the intellectual capacity, but it's not that necessarily. It's that you live in a space where the knowledge that you need to challenge this thing that's holding you down is just not available. It's not even the question of giving yourself permission to think differently and challenge your beliefs is not even a thing for them, because there is not even a competing ideology in the sphere in which they exist.
Let me ask you one last question, Lewis, and then I'm going to move on to the last couple of callers here today. In the area of Africa where you grew up, do you think it would make sense? And this could be the dumbest idea ever, but do you think it would be beneficial for somebody like myself to go to that area and present seminars on secular humanism as an option to religion? Do you think that would be beneficial to the people that are living there?
Absolutely. I think it would be. And I think as someone who was born and grew up there, who then got the opportunity to move away, that's something that I think I have to take on. I think that I would like to take on in the future, because I think it would benefit a lot of people to introduce that. And then it will take time. Obviously, there'll be some pushback, but I think that we need to start, people like myself that were born and raised in Africa and got to leave. It's kind of up to us now to say, okay, we have learned these different ways of thinking. Can we introduce them to other people that we know that can benefit from it? And so my answer to that is absolutely, that would be super beneficial. And I guess why the reason I say someone like myself would have to do that is that there's language barriers and there's cultural, tradition, things of that nature. But in general, it would be super beneficial.
Where, if you don't mind me asking, where are you from originally?
I'm from South Africa.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I want to go to South Africa for a number of different reasons, but I tell you what, Lewis, maybe the two of us get together at some point, take a trip down to South Africa and do this jointly, where you cover the language barrier issues and plotting it out, and we go about, maybe we can become missionaries for secular humanism. On the other hand, I might just stay here and continue raising my snakes. But there's some great snakes there. We actually have African house snakes here, a couple different varieties, and are looking to breed more of them. And I've got a friend in South Africa right now that I reached out to, our friendly acquaintance. We're not good friends or anything, but I reached out to her to see what she knew about him and whether or not she could get him. So I have other reasons to want to go to Africa other than just being a missionary for secular humanism. Because I want to go down and hang out and get to know the South African reptile community. But I appreciate you calling so much, Lewis, and thanks for the cool thoughts. And at some point maybe we go.
So much. Yeah, maybe I'll stay in touch. I'll probably write you and expand on my thoughts and hear what you have to say.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Take care. All right. I only have one call left for today, and after that call's over, we're going to go to Super Chats, and I'm going to do all the Super Chats that come in while we're still alive that are $5 or more. So you guys can drop your supers in for Arden's asking me, what was the angry Matt poll you talked about earlier? She was busy working on David's tech issue. I was going to put a poll up that was, is Matt just generally too angry? Do that poll. And by the way, for those, if she puts the poll up, that's not about tonight. Obviously, anybody who says it was too angry tonight, fuck off. But as just a general thing, it tied into what I was saying at the beginning. I'm going to do this one last call. And then we'll do the Super Chats. I'm actually going to click yes just to kick it off. Boom, 100%. It was 100% yes for a second because I clicked on it first. And then, I'll get the announcements and the other stuff, but we'll go through all the socials and basically everything that comes in that is $5 or over. Boom, I'm going to do them. I'm going to do them all. And I will sit here until they stop coming in or until Arden or the internet dies or something. So final caller for tonight, Bill in Texas, is an atheist who has a theory that everyone's actually an atheist. So welcome, Bill. How you doing?
How's it going, Matt?
I'm doing pretty well considering I didn't get to. I miss David. Fitz and I haven't done a show in quite a while, and he's got a new book coming out, and it's a book I'm genuinely excited about. And he gave me advanced copies, and
Awesome.
I never got around to reading it. And so tonight was going to be the focus on that. But yeah, I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Just living life here in Austin, Texas, and just enjoying life, man. First of all, I need to tell you, I do have a speech disfluency, so don't be alarmed if you hear like a little delay in my words or anything like that. It's just, but I do have a theory, and I just wanted to see if maybe you can help me unpack this.
Sure.
So, in order to be truly convinced, you need to have some kind of evidence, right? But if there is no evidence, then how can somebody be truly convinced? Wouldn't that mean that by default, if nobody is truly convinced, wouldn't that make the world actually atheist, but maybe everybody else is just pretending not to be?
Okay. I hate to do this. I want you to repeat everything you said because I think I misheard something at the beginning that would impact us, and I don't want to get this wrong for you. So just do the whole thing one more time, and I will focus.
Okay. In order to be convinced of something, you need to have some sort of evidence. But if there is no evidence, then how could anybody be truly convinced? Therefore, if nobody is truly convinced, due to lack of evidence, then would that mean that by default the world is atheist?
Okay.
Do you understand my
got it all.
question?
I got it all. Yeah. So in general, you start with, to be convinced, you need some sort of evidence. I will say that that's not necessarily the case.
Okay.
Becoming convinced, being convinced is the result of becoming convinced. And you can be convinced for good reasons or bad reasons. You can be convinced that there's good evidence when there's not good evidence. You could have flawed understanding of evidence. You could have flawed interpretation of the evidence. Generally speaking, when it comes to like theistic claims and Christian claims and things like that, they think they have mountains of evidence. They just think it's good evidence, and it may not be good evidence. And so when you start with, to be convinced, you need some sort of evidence. Technically, that's not correct. To become convinced, you just need whatever it is that compels you to be there. If you say, not everybody has a foundation that is based on evidence. It could just be a feeling, like the sensus divinatus. And so your next thing is, if there is no evidence, then you can't be convinced. So that's just wrong, because there can be a complete absence of good evidence or an absence of any evidence that conforms with the proposition. And yet people could still be convinced that there was evidence. It's just the nature of our flawed thinking. And so then on the front, if nobody's convinced, does that mean that we're by default atheists? I think we are by default atheists, irrespective of anything else you've said or I've said. I think that the default position for any claim should be not being convinced. And so are babies born atheists? Yes. As far as I can tell, babies are born atheists, but not in any way that matters, because until you actually evaluated a proposition, what difference does it make if you didn't accept it? That's like saying, eventually you'll be accepted into college, but that doesn't mean that a baby was accepted into college. I guess it's kind of flawed. So it's
okay. Yeah, that's a great analogy.
There's some definite problems there.
Okay. Just wanted to throw out that theory to you and just kind of see what you had to say about it. And
yeah, no worries.
Won't take up any more of your time. I know you got the. What's that?
Yeah, no. I said I'd also caution you that first of all, thinking along these lines is great. Bounce stuff around, bounce ideas around, see what you do. But one of the things to consider is that even if there was an argument that everybody is an atheist, and if it was valid and sound. Like one of the
by default.
Yeah, sure. Well, that puts it in a different category. If you're an atheist by default and you have to be convinced of it, yes, I think that's the case. I just don't think that's the argument that gets there. But the thing that I was going to caution you about is the concern of, like, for example, atheists will say things like, everybody's an atheist. I just believe in one fewer God than you do. And that is not, even though it may be true, like my mom believes in one God, I believe in none. So I believe in one fewer God than my mom. The fact that that is true is essentially trivial and is not going to change my mom's mind at all. And so there's two different categories of arguments. One are these really cool. I got a mom like
that too, man.
Yeah, well, there's two categories of arguments. One first category is these really cool kind of intellectual exercises where we get to something that's true, that is a potential problem for theistic claims and theistic individuals. And then the other is, and yet aren't actually convincing. And the second category is ones where even if it were true, it doesn't really do your case any good, because the reason they believe has nothing to do with whether or not you just go one God further. Ha ha ha. They're able to write that all off because they have some foundational view that allows them to dismiss anything you say as soon as you say that. And so it's worth digging through. I'm not saying there's any problem like that here in saying we start off atheists and become convinced of a God. I think that rather than pointing out that saying there's not evidence, it's worth it to say, Is the evidence sufficient to justify being convinced that a God exists? And that's where the argument
Gotcha.
really is.
Cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Matt.
All right. Oh, we had said our thank yous, and I have hung up, and we have shut off the calls, and now we got super chats, and now is the point where we find out, did Arden set up an entire solo super chat video model with just me, or is there going to be me and of course she did. I'm telling you, I got the best partner and producer on the planet. Anybody who thinks different, you're just fucking wrong. You are just fucking wrong. It's just
what
the way
Matt
it is.
doesn't know. I should really just take the credit and walk, but what Matt doesn't know is there's always 2 extra windows in my button access. And for all of the shows that don't have an extra window like TACIS does, I've already got this set up.
Yeah, I figured it'd be good to go. Although, I'm no longer framed center. I'm kind of off. Just
Should
I'm
be the
scooting
exact same crop that you would have had on the double with David.
Yeah, I'm wondering if. Oh, I bet I know what it is. Especially since there's an HDMI jack hanging down. When the cat on Monday decided to climb over the top of me and jump up to the top. There we go. I have now put the camera back where it was before your cat knocked it over during the show. All right. $10 from Greg Murkowski. Thanks for the show. Thank you, Greg. Greg got in first, which is frequent for Greg. Yordim says, I read the consensus among historians is that some guy named Jesus existed. Why? I learned that we need a reliable insider eyewitness source and an outsider source to confirm it. 10 euros. I apologize that we lost David because this is a question where David and I probably would have disagreed since he's a mythicist and I'm not. Generally speaking, Yordim, here's my take on that. Historians generally go with the notion that Jesus existed because if a figure is spoken about by other people who presumably existed as if that person existed, by default, we just assume that that's the case. It's not a normal thing to question the mere existence of a figure until that figure is, or unless that figure is part of just a fairy tale thing. So we don't think that Jack from Jack and the Beanstalk was a real person because the nature of that story is thus and so. The problem comes in when you have a figure like Jesus, where there are elements of that individual's story that we would, I think, rightly consider myth and fanciful and fictional. And yet there are aspects of that story that are just, mundane and reported on as if they're facts. And so I would suspect that the bulk of historians are just going to, for the sake of going along and being consistent, say, yes, we will accept that some individual existed here as Jesus. But historians are not going to be saying that it's a fact of history that Jesus turned water into wine, healed the sick, was crucified, died, and resurrected. Historians can't affirm those elements. What they can affirm is that these are claims about that individual that aren't substantiated. So, Sergius Maximus, $5 Canadian, says, Matt, stand-up comedy is art and art is subjective. You may not like the jokes, but they are funny to people who are capable for self-humor. Okay, I'm assuming this came in while I was talking about Seinfeld. And yes, I know that stand-up comedy is art and art is subjective. And I know that whether or not I like the jokes, there are people who find them funny. People who find gay bashing jokes funny are shitty people, and I'm going to call them out on it. And comedians who write sitcoms that have tacky rape jokes and gay bashing jokes and transphobic jokes and fat shaming jokes, I'm not only not going to think they're funny, I'm going to let them know that I don't think they're funny. And so are a lot of other people, which is why that the comedy zeitgeist has shifted to where some things, just much the same way things that we did in the 40s and 50s started getting called out in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And similarly, things that we did in the 60s, 70s, 80s start getting called out in the 90s and aughts and 10s. Yeah, I'm aware that my opinion on humor is going to be different from other people. Like I mentioned, I have no problem with offense. I think Jimmy Carr is one of the greatest comedy minds in the history of the world and is easily my favorite comedian. I think when your comedy is mean and it punches down, I think it's worthwhile for decent people to call that out and say, we can be funny without being shitheads. $5 from Blackwater Ted. How can heaven be so great if we have to deal with religious people for an eternity? Yeah, it's the heaven for the climate and hell for the company argument. I'll be in good company in hell. The problem is, I mean, obviously, there's no reason to really entertain those notions at all. Especially these aren't going to be good arguments from a theistic standpoint. Of, you know, ooh, I don't want to hang out with religious people. You know, it's weird because in heaven, supposedly you have a new body and a new you, and you can't be sad, which means it's not you anymore, which is weird because sadness is part of who we are. But yeah, thanks, Blackwater Ted. $10 from Phoenix King Theo. A young Earth creationist accused me of the no true Scotsman fallacy when I had such an argument about no true Scotsman fallacy the other day. No true Scotsman fallacy when I said actual scientists when referring to non-young Earth creationists. Is that a valid use of the fallacy? And if so, how do I avoid it in the future? Great question. The no true Scotsman fallacy is when you create a criterion for a category that isn't a recognized criterion for a category. So it comes from the, no Scotsman puts sugar on his porridge. Well, my uncle's a Scotsman. He puts sugar in his porridge. Well, no true Scotsman would be. So the true is suggesting that there's a secondary category of Scotsman that you're just pulling out of your butt, where those are the people who don't put sugar on it. It applies in many different circumstances. When you say actual scientist, it, depending on how you phrased it, it could be a no true Scotsman fallacy. It might also just be an ad hominem fallacy. Actual scientist is genuinely a problematic thing. And because you've put the focus on the individual, and as I pointed out earlier in the show, nothing is true and nothing should be considered true merely because a scientist, actual scientist, or all scientists say so. It is the evidence we should be pointing to, and we should be saying that scientists, the scientific consensus among experts is that this evidence is accurate and that this evidence is sufficient to warrant this particular conclusion. It's just a non-starter. The Earth is not young. The Earth is billions of years old. The only tenable, even a remotely tenable theistic argument for young Earth creation is that the Earth is young, but God, when he made it look old, because the evidence is overwhelming that it is not, that it is vastly more ancient than 6,000 to 10,000 years. But yeah, I would drop the actual scientist language. I'm probably guilty of the same thing many times over. You might have been rightly called out. I would, instead of making it about the scientists, I'd make it about the evidence. But thank you. $5 from Gayest Husky. We know that the Earth is not flat because if it was flat, then cats would have already knocked everything off of it by now. That may be the greatest rebuttal of the flat Earth ever. It's especially true, as Arden can vouch for, is we have a cat. It's Arden's cat. It's a demon. And it will absolutely knock anything and everything off any and every flat surface that it can. Unless it finds a flat surface it's not supposed to lay on, like the top of one of the reptile enclosures, where it decides to lay. And then it's really mad when I go to knock it off of that flat surface.
People commented on the thing that I called you out on like last month, how whenever the animals are annoying, they suddenly become mine.
Oh, yeah, no.
They're always ours until they're annoying, and then somehow they're just mine.
That's true. We got a new boa today. If it turns out to be terrible, it's Arden's boa. I don't even know why that needed a comment. That should just be obvious to everybody. $14 Canadian from Tarek Alsafi. 1, killing a healthy baby isn't good. 2, killing 2 or more babies is worse than killing 1 healthy baby. The biblical God drowned every baby in the world. Therefore, the biblical God is not good. Let's see. I think you've got pieces of a potentially good argument here, but you definitely have an equivocation fallacy where you say killing a healthy baby isn't good. So you're saying this action isn't good. And then your conclusion is, therefore, the biblical God is not good, but the God isn't an action. And so you need to fix that equivocation, which you can do by saying killing a healthy baby isn't an action that could be taken by an agent we would identify as good. And now you're talking about the action, but the good qualifier goes to the agent. The problem is that I think this needs to be changed to killing a healthy baby isn't an action that can be taken by an agent that we consider morally perfect. Because it's possible for somebody to be good and still do things that aren't good. You can lie and steal and kill and be otherwise good in the other categories. And if you start doing math with your actions to determine how good you are you 70% good, are you 80% good, maybe you did all these terrible things, but you've made amends for them and now you're a different person. And so merely, taking a life may not be enough to say this person is evil or this person is not good. And generally we don't summarize people's entire characters that way. I'm good and I'm not good, depending on how we're going to characterize things. I've done things that are not good. I've also done things that are good. In the balance, how do we do that? How do we weigh this? Is it, have I done more good things than bad things? Have I done more overall good than overall bad? It's that math with morality is as confusing and problematic as trying to do math with souls. And so I would change this to say, killing a healthy baby isn't consistent, is not a feature of a morally perfect being. Or advocating for the killing of a healthy baby is not consistent with a morally perfect being. There's other problems there, where there could be some circumstance that somebody could present where killing a healthy baby could be the absolute best thing morally. So, but yeah, I think one of the keys is to go to moral perfection. If you're gonna try and hang stuff on God, drowning the entire world isn't consistent with a morally perfect being. The God of the Bible drowned the entire world, excepting 8 people. However you want to do it. That gets rid of the equivocation problem and probably makes it a little tighter because you're talking about moral perfection, because moral perfection doesn't have the weighing of good, bad balance issue that we might have with a morally imperfect being like myself. $5 from Monkey to Typewriter. If we don't, and I mean soon, get logical basics into the schools, I despair for our species, this community, and my kiddo, renew my hopes. You're gay, homie. Yeah, it's, I'm with you. Thank you so much. $5 from Skeptoidius. Ever since I became one of the girls, I have an even stronger inclination to smash the patriarchy, and I don't know why. Must be God. Must be. Thank you for your contribution. $10 from Julie Mack. Huge fan, Matt. You too, Arden. You maintained your Zen quite well tonight, Matt, but I would love to see a t-shirt in the merch store with Matt's face and the caption, no, you're no, sir. Okay. Well, there's this person down the hall.
Noted.
That's really good. Noted. Yeah. I was like, who's really good at that? There's a couple of older shirts with my face on with the goatee, both one for the magic show and another one, a solipsism shirt we did where it's just a brain in a vat in a vat, and it's thinking with like a little icon of me that says, I don't know, and you don't either. Little too esoteric, but $10 from Project Frux. Is it probable that anytime in the near future, the line will have a regular co-host to represent people of color? I know the atheist community is dominated by white people, but I promise you we exist. Yes, I'm well aware that you exist. And I know that we're in a position where we're frequently having people of color on as guests where, Mandisa might come on or Brady might come on. I'm looking to reach out to Anthony Penn as he's got a new book coming out. There's nothing stopping us from having a person of color who's a regular co-host other than finding someone who says, I have the time and interest to do this and would like to do this. Once we have that from somebody who's guested a couple times, I don't know that there'd be anything at all preventing us from saying, yes, please. It's just that while I guarantee, I know that you exist, a good chunk of my friends who are people of color are busy. Can't commit to a regular show schedule. I'm freakishly weird in the sense that I've done this for 20 years and just, I don't have a life outside of this. Maybe you could say, maybe all my Black friends have lives. But with organizations like Black Nonbelievers, there are plenty of opportunities for us to get more and more guests on. And the second you want to come on, Frox, and try your hand with it, it's the sort of thing that we just generally would love to have happen. But the practical reality of finding any host of any gender, of any ethnic identity, it's really difficult to find people who are good at it and have the time and desire to do it on a regular basis, because people have lives and this is not a trivial amount of work. I know I joke about how lazy I am and don't get stuff done, but I get stuff done. So yes, I want that to happen, and it'll happen just the second one of our guests says, hey, is there a possibility of a co-host slot? And we can look into it. Obviously, I can't promise anything to anybody, but we'll see. This is the point where I would be expecting a co-host to jump in and affirm this. And so flying solo is a little bit of a pain in the butt sometimes. $10 from PhD Tony. I, for one, am grateful there is no afterlife. Everyone has the one life. We should value our life and the lives of those around us. It wasn't an atheist who said, kill them all, God will know his own. Yeah. Kill them all, let God sort them out type thing. $20 from Jatra Plastics. Love you, Matt. Been watching for a while and helped me overcome my Catholic origins. I had many questions addressed on the show and found my way out. Perfect. Thank you for your generosity, and I'm glad you found it useful. It's wild that if you go to an atheist hangout, an atheist convention, something like that, and you start talking to people, it becomes obvious very quickly who has been a lifelong atheist, who was primarily a Christian Protestant who became an atheist, and who was a Catholic who became an atheist. Because we retain bits of the language and bits of the culture related to those that permeate how we talk about things on a regular basis. $5 from Imson. Please list out the items needed for survival that can be stored in Matt's beard. Oh, I'm afraid that's going to have to be a video on its own. But you can definitely weave paracord through here and hang a number of things off of it. You could braid that paracord in. I couldn't possibly list all of them. Maybe for $20, I'll list 5 more. But $10 from Sherman Bay. Skeptics of the world, unite. Keep on trucking, dude. Amen. Sherman Boy actually sent in another one right afterward for another $10. I'm trying to persuade a friend who's a Muslim and lives in Germany to call into your show and present her beliefs. But so far, she says she's too busy to call. Then take her at her word. It may be that she's afraid to call. It may be that she doesn't want to call. It may be that she's not comfortable with it. It may be that she finds this a waste of time. There could be a million different explanations for why she's not interested in calling. But if somebody says they're too busy, fine. I appreciate the fact that you're reaching out to people and recommending the show, and in particular, recommending potential theistic callers. That's awesome. You all could be doing that. And we are, like tonight, I'm going to be pushing Zen mode way more often, but not to the point where it hurts the show. I'm always going to be me. And if somebody's inability to have a productive conversation, to answer the questions, somebody like Joshua earlier today, if it gets to the point where, I'm a profanity yelling, name calling screed, I don't always get it right, but I'm generally kind of okay with it. But I can also appreciate the fact that that's not necessarily always the best way. There's people who are genuinely confused. I had a conversation with somebody in email where it ended when I was basically saying, you seem to think that the point is to convince the caller. And I've talked about this before, which is why it surprised me, because this is a kind of a long-time listener, or I think it's a long-time listener. I'm always going to present the case and ask the questions that I think are most important to get a reasonable person to the truth. But we already know, and we saw it here tonight. We saw a caller who basically said, nothing I say is going to change their mind. I engage with the callers not to specifically reach them, but to reach all the people out there that are watching that share that caller's view and their arguments. Because when you're under the spotlight, when you are the caller on the show, when you are the focus, it is far less likely that you're going to willingly change your mind in discussion. It is far less likely that you're even going to answer questions honestly. You're going to have your guard up. You're going to be on defense. But if you're at home watching and you agree with the caller and the arguments they're making, you sympathetically feel the embarrassment of having those arguments demolished while not suffering the public humiliation of it. It is important, and we know this from psychologists talking about how people change minds. If there's young kids here who you've been lying to about Christmas, you might want to send them away. There are people who find out about Santa because they get curious and investigate and look for evidence, and they find the evidence that they do or don't need to reach a different conclusion. There are others that kind of just intuitively outgrow the idea. There are others that stop believing because they were mocked and made fun of on the bus to school. Oh, you're a baby, you still believe this. I don't advocate for the, oh, you're a baby, you still believe this line of thought for the God thing. But if somebody is publicly embarrassed for presenting really bad arguments for God, and somebody sitting at home sees that, they get the experience of having been embarrassed without having to face the consequences of it. And that can be very helpful to giving them the permission that I talked about earlier to change their mind. We know that some people under fire, when faced with evidence that contradicts their belief, will just in fact double down. We know that. 1599 from Astor Bjarni. I just got back from a vacation to Orlando, Florida. I had a decent time at Universal. Thanks for the recommendation. You're welcome. What's the deal with bumper stickers? ISK equals Icelandic kroner. 1,500 is about $10. Thank you for the about $10. What's the deal with bumper stickers? I used to have bumper stickers on my old crappy car. I have no bumper stickers on my truck. I don't like putting bumper stickers on cars. Unless you're just going to go all out, unless you're going to make your car a statement. And so for the people who are doing that, cool. I like reading the bumper stickers. I think part of it is that we were able to make clever statements. If I was going to put anything on the back of my truck, I'd take up the entire tailgate. I wouldn't put it on a bumper. It'd be the entire tailgate. Actually, I'd love to have one of those signs that I can control electronically from the front with voice commands, so I can actually send a message to the dickhead behind me. But if I just put like sticker on the back of the truck, it would say, put down your fucking phone, and the left lane is for passing. Get over. Those would be the first things I put on there. But yeah, it's bumper stickers a kind of a curious thing. It's a way, we love our cars and we love driving, and so it's a way that people started propagating messages. $10 from William Mattis. Boobies, because I don't want to be mature. Who could blame you? Who could blame you for not wanting to be mature? Maturity's so overrated. Thank you, William. $5 from SJL. Either it is supernatural or it's not. Being able to make a statement with two options does not make them equal options. Absolutely correct. I have in my wallet a lottery ticket for the Mega Millions that was drawn last night. This lottery ticket is either a winner or it's not. Does that mean that my odds of hitting last night's lottery was 50-50? Of course not. And yet, despite that, and I've told this story before, so I'll just keep it really short, I had a PhD philosophy candidate show up at Atheists or Skeptics in the Pub night and argue with me for almost an hour that the odds of winning the lottery were in fact 50-50. And that's a level of dumb that I rarely experience in person. Thanks for that, SJL. 50 New Zealand dollars from Chad Michael. Butts are better than boobies, Albert Einstein. I'm not sure that that's actually a quote, but I'm down. $9.99 from I Am Conrad. Apologies if this content vid already exists. In your theist years, what was your go-to argument you viewed as the best, and was it hard to let go of belief in the argument after it logically fell apart? I've talked about this before. There was no go-to argument. I became convinced for the first time at about the age of 5. I walked down the aisle at a revival and accepted Jesus into my heart, and it just became the case. Like, this was the truth. It was obvious, and you felt it, and you're feeling elated in church, and that's the Holy Spirit and all this other stuff. It was, I think, probably early on, I would have probably gone with some sort of argumentum ad populum fallacy that, all these people couldn't be wrong about this. There's just too many people who have believed for so long and seen so many benefits tied to this that it just can't fail to be true. I think it's very difficult for me to put myself back in that mindset, especially the younger mindset, because I struggled with this a bit more in my teens as I began to kind of learn more about logical arguments. But yeah, it was, I think it probably would have been like that, an appeal to the reliability of scripture and just the popularity of the belief, both of which are fallacious. Well, appealing to the popularity of scripture isn't itself necessarily fallacious. It's just that the reliability isn't what I thought it was. $9.99 from Stephen. I'm debating Andrew Wilson from The Crucible. The main problem is that people draw a line around themselves to decide who can draw the line authoritatively regarding religion. I'm a big fan of you, Matt. Well, good luck engaging with a liar. I hope it goes better for you than it did for me. $10 New Zealand from Chad Michael. Also, recently, Seth Andrews wrote an article about how religion is not mental illness. Some people disagree. What's your thoughts? I'm in complete agreement with Seth, and everybody who disagrees is, in fact, unquestionably wrong. Religion is not mental illness. It's not going to appear in the DSM. When I stopped being religious, I didn't get cured. I didn't heal myself. I also, my IQ didn't go up. There's a lot of things. There are occasions where somebody's religiosity may be tied to a separate mental illness. There are occasions where people who are religious and mentally ill. There are also occasions where people are atheist and mentally ill. And maybe nearly everybody has some mental illness or another. But religion is not a mental illness, and religiosity is not itself a mental illness. This is a non-controversial position, and the only people who are advocating it are a few smug atheist pricks that want to make believe everybody who's religious is either an idiot or mentally ill, rather than just honestly wrong, indoctrinated, or perhaps correct. It's a very frustrating thing. Yeah, Seth and I haven't read the article, but on the issue of whether it's mental illness, we're on the same page. And by the way, so is Shannon. Call in when Shannon's hosting sometime and ask her what her thoughts are about religion and whether it's mental illness, and you will get an earful for a while. 1999 from Jason. Missed the beginning as usual on Wednesday because of work. Always love the rewatch, even if I miss the chat. Big thanks to the host, the producers, except Jimmy, call screeners, and of course the mods in chat. Hashtag Team Chaos. Hashtag You're Gay, homie. Thanks, Jason. And $10 for Sean. Matt, am I spelling Fergalburgle, Manergalburgle correctly? I think so. It may be M-A-N. I'd have to look up how I spelled it the first time, but you're at least, 90% correct there. And maybe Fergalburgle, Manergalburgle, as you spelled it, is one thing, and Fergalburgle, Manergalburgle with M-A-N in the Manergal, maybe another thing. We don't know. I don't know what any of them are. At Ardenhart, I disagree with the assertion that babies are born atheists. Atheists have a God concept. Babies don't. I would just consider them non-religious. If atheist at its minimum is any agent that is not convinced a God exists, then someone who's never been presented with the concept definitely does not believe that a God exists. So under that definition, they're atheist. The notion that you have to, babies don't believe in string theory. Babies don't believe in the Pythagorean theorem. Babies don't believe in the vaccine theory of disease. They are non-believers in all of those things, not because they've been presented with those things and rejected them, but because they don't have those concepts, which means they don't accept those. And under the minimal definition of atheist, which is someone who does not accept those propositions, they definitely qualify. Now, if you want to say it only counts once someone's been presented with the proposition, so now at whatever the first age someone can possibly conceive of a God, or they're presented with it, they're still immediately an atheist, because when you're presented the proposition, you are not instantly convinced. You have to become convinced. And so there's still a period from the instant you hear that until you become convinced where you're also an atheist. I understand the rejection of it, but I mean, I just got to be true to the definition. And if the minimal definition, because if we said an atheist is someone who's been presented with a God concept, thought about it, evaluate, or is someone who's been presented with a God concept, evaluated and dismissed it. that's already a problematic definition of atheist, because what's it mean to say it's been dismissed? And I'm not saying that you're saying that. I'm just, who knows? Whoops, I clicked the wrong thing. Thanks, Cookies. And I got an email from you. I just haven't had a chance to look at it yet, because Arden can tell you I've worked harder in the last 2 weeks than in any period in the last 3 years, I think, probably. $5 from LHRPG Official. Hey, Matt, do you like stand-up about religion? And if so, which comedian did your favorite bit? I do like stand-up about religion. There's a British comedian that did some of my favorite bits about religion, but I'm not remembering his name right now. Somebody will know, but yeah, I really hate when I can't remember names like that. But yeah, I like stand-up about religion. I didn't think the Christian comedian the other day was very funny. $5 from Monkey to Typewriter. The Daily Wire now has an animated comedy show from Adam Carolla. Oh boy. Watch the trailer and tell me you can't make jokes that make you an asshole. All you had to do is say Adam Carolla. I don't even have to go watch it. I mean, unless he's turned over a new leaf. Yeah, it's unlikely I'll be watching anything from Adam, but I could be wrong. I just don't have much of a desire to go find out if I'm wrong. $10 from Sonic Shroom. Science encourages us to ask questions and then check to find out if it's true. Religion encourages us to not question or check to find out if it's true. Yeah, it's not so much that that's the encouragement, discouragement. It's science is the rigorous process of discovery where you attempt to eliminate your biases ahead of time. I hope. $5 Canadian from Steve Aldersley. Matt, why do you think most theists assume that God created everything with humans as the focus when for millions of years we weren't even around? Oh, because we want to feel special. We don't want to think we're an accident of like God created the whole universe and us as like an afterthought. When the Bible talks about us as the special part of creation where Adam gets to go name all the other animals, putting us as superior to all those other animals, that's our ego. I mean, we want to feel loved. We want to feel, not alone. We want to feel like there's somebody with answers. All these things that get together for religious stuff, it makes people feel important. Just like conspiracy theories make people feel important because then they feel like they're in the know, like they're in on the secret that somebody else is missing. And that's a power thing. It's like, I complained about Seinfeld at the top of the show. Seinfeld doesn't mean the money. What he needs is relevance. Seinfeld hasn't been relevant since he retired from his show. Not in any major way. Not that there was any, people mentioned Seinfeld, you knew who he was, but he was one of the biggest stars on the planet for a period of time. And then that kind of ended. So, his concern to come out and do his little, the extreme left PC crap is killing comedy, isn't about him making money. It's about him feeling relevant, I would suspect. $5 from Music and Coco. Do you believe the Epicurean problem of evil is logically unsound for omnipotent and benevolent gods, or just that it's unconvincing to theists? No, I think it's just unconvincing because it's really easy to say, now, I'm not a fan of problem of evil because I don't find it particularly, I don't think it should be convincing. I know that it can be convincing. There are tons of people who leave religions because of some version of a problem of evil, problem of excessive evil, problem of excessive suffering. Even Stephen Fry, when he was talking about it, it was, whatever type of cancer in infants, what's that about? God's got a lot of explaining to do. I don't like it because the Christian model, standard Christian model, or most standard Christian models, I guess I should say, has this notion that God created a world that was good and we broke it. We brought sin and death into the world through our disobedience. And that is now the explanation for why all evil exists. And somebody might say, yeah, but that doesn't explain, a tsunami that takes out 1 million people. It actually does, at least for some. When I was a Southern Baptist fundamentalist Christian, sin didn't just impact humans' interactions with each other. Sin brought sin and death into the world. And so hurricanes and tornadoes and cancer and all those things that are destructive elements of nature impact us because of us, from what used to be my old view of Christianity. And so the problem of evil never registered with me. Is God capable of preventing illness? Then why doesn't he? Or preventing evil, then why doesn't he? Well, the other aspect is he will. And there's a hell reserved for the devil and all of his angels, and everything be triumph over. And not to do something that almost no creationists would actually do, but on a B theory of time, technically he already has, if in fact he exists and the story is true. But yeah, for an omnibenevolent God, I think if you are comfortable using a problem of evil argument to engage with theists, go for it. Just make sure that you're prepared for the various apologetics that they're going to engage in to try to explain why evil or suffering or excessive suffering exists. 999 from Captain Zero. Do you think math was invented or discovered? Depends on what you want to call math. The various mathematics we have invented are deductive manipulations of something we've discovered. So, for example, geometry, the abstract idea of a triangle, a 90-degree triangle. We talked about Pythagorean theorem earlier. Those things are true, and they are discoveries about that abstract Platonic triangular ideal. The math, at its basic sense, like logic, the foundational principles are directly derived from logic. If you begin with identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle, you can build set theory out of that. And from set theory, all you need is the concept of quantities, which are obvious, to then discover truths about mathematics. But there are also mathematics in the sense of languages and manipulations that we invented on top of those discoveries. So I don't think it's a done deal either way.
Hey,
yeah.
I just had a commenter mention that their super didn't get pushed through, and it is in the queue, but I went back and somehow we skipped over it. So I'm going to send that one right now.
Okay. 999 from Daniel. Hey, Matt, looking forward to seeing you in Orlando this weekend. Thank you so much. And thank you for reminding me. Oh my God, it's amazing. Oh, all right. Yes, this was important. I was supposed to actually announce this and push this as well, and got distracted and forgot. So after I get past all my Facebook files, I was in Facebook Messenger jail for 3 days. So the Central Florida Free Thought community is having me down for a talk, Can You Hang Up on Family? And this is going to be this Sunday, May 19th at 2 p.m. at the University Club of Winter Park. If you are in or around Orlando and would like to participate, I think they have a suggested donation of $10 for this, but it's the Central Florida Free Thought community. I will be speaking this Sunday, 4 days from now, at 2 p.m. at University Club of Winter Park. There is a link to this on my Facebook page right now. Julie asked 3 days ago if there will be a recording of this. Yes, the plan is to have it recorded, and then I will be posting this on my Patreon as one of May's videos. But I know you're like, oh, if I can watch it later, I'll watch it later. I get that. But if you're able to show up and watch it live, first of all, it's great to support that community who's bringing me down to actually do that. It's great to find this community so you can interact with other people. And also, I'd like to say hi. It'd be nice. So thank you, Daniel, for your donation and for getting me off my dead ass and actually promoting the thing that I'm doing this weekend. So I think Daniel's might have been like, as I was shifting from page 2 to page 1, I think one came in and shifted everything down one.
Yep, that does happen. That's really annoying.
666 from Lucifer Morningstar. First time catching the Hang Up Live. Cheers. Thank you. Thank you for your donation, and I hope that you enjoyed your first time here live. 999 from Steven. Do you think that people who claim that people piggyback off Christian values is a fallacy because Christians claim dominion over morality and reality? Okay. I think I know what you're talking about. And it's the people who are saying you're only moral because you borrow from the Christian worldview. But the question you're asking is this a fallacy? No, it's not necessarily a fallacy. It's just wrong. Not everything's wrong is a fallacy, and not everything's a fallacy means the conclusion is wrong. I think we spend so much time talking about fallacies, and I do too. And they're critical. They're important. I think that a lot of people are confused about fallacies and think that fallacy and false are equivalent, which is that's the fallacy. I guess I'm gonna dig in some more stuff on fallacies. Go to patreon.com/atheist debates. Now, first of all, I'm gonna interject here to do all the relevant advertising for the line, and then I'm gonna keep going through the rest of the super chats here. And I'm gonna try to trick you all, because somebody always does a super chat while I'm doing my final wrap up, and then we feel bad because either we didn't get a chance to read it, or I think there were 2 that got missed next time. So let me get the announcements out of the way while you guys try and sneak in your last few super chats now. And yep, the show's coming up. Transatlantic Call-In Show, 2 p.m. tomorrow, Arden and Josie. Sunday show at 2 p.m. is Forrest and Eric. 7 p.m. is Sunday show After Dark with Paulogia and John Gleason. Monday, Skeptalk's John Gleason and Dr. Aron Adair. Tuesday's Chewed Gum with Eva's Frame and Alyssa Ljub. And Wednesday's The Hang Up with me and Derek from Myth Vision. You can support the channel both by liking, subscribing, ringing the bell so you get notifications. I only see 637 likes right now after I clicked like. You guys should easily be able to get that to 666 before I've even finished the announcements and get back to the super chats. But you can go to linemerch.com, and there you will find, if Arden wants to put up a line merch splash.
I don't have one.
Okay. I was like, I've thrown her a curve by interrupting super chats to do this, but you can go to linemerch.com. That's one of the best ways to support. You can also go to QAline.com and / the line debates and apply to be on InBoss or one of the other debate shows. You can also support PayPal directly to Mr. Atheist. There's Cash App. All of these links are down there. There's an Amazon wish list and other stuff. There are some problems related to demonetization on some videos that get put up and fought. And so we also are really encouraging people to join patreon.com / call the line. And what's the next goal when we get to 1,000? Is that when Jimmy and I are doing our bad movie reviews?
Yep.
Sweet. All right. I think that's all the announcements. And what that means is I'm going to get through the rest of these super chats. And when I get to the end of the super chats, which right now Daniel looks like Daniel's going to be the last one. I'm going to wrap up super quick. Like, I'm going to be, that's the last super chat and we're moving on. I'll see you guys next week. And then you'll hear music playing. I'm giving you guys as much advance warning as I can. But yeah, Stephen, it's not necessarily a fallacy. It could just be wrong. It's like saying, you stole my lunch money. No, I didn't. 666 for Lucifer Morningstar, new atheist. obviously, because you spelled it wrong. Listening to the, I'm having fun, but you did spell it wrong. Listening to the calls have been instrumental. I heard the same arguments I had in my head get demolished. Yeah, yes. Thank you for pointing that out. 999 from Jason. I told my sister the truth about Santa when I was 10. She's 3 years my junior, and I was punished for it. I think that moment was the birth of my skepticism. It's funny the way people react to that. I'm pretty confident that, I don't know, I've gone back and forth on what I would do with my own kids. But the older I get, the less likely it is I'm going to have to actually face that question. $50, amazingly, from Godfrey and Good. Aloha, a common definition of faith is belief without evidence, but theists say they believe because my pastor said, I can feel it in my heart, etc. If theists claim to have faith based on what they perceive as evidence, do they really have faith? If you define faith as a belief in the absence of evidence, then if you have evidence, then you're no longer exercising faith. So that's a real objection. I think a lot more people try to say that it's reasonable faith, that faith is the, see what, for me, faith is the excuse people give for believing things when they don't have a good reason. For some theists, they say that faith is confidence in the absence of certainty. And so they're just describing it as trust. It's independent from whether or not they have evidence. It's independent from whether or not they have sufficient evidence. It is just confidence in the absence of certainty, except that that's true for anything and everything. There's nothing that we have certainty about. So if you're confident about anything, you could say that's faith. And that puts all positions, the most, biological evolution, gravity, the germ theory of disease, all of those are confidence in the absence of certainty. And so if you believe any of those things, you could say that's faith too. And that's actually what they kind of want. Because if now they can say, well, you have faith too, you have confidence in the absence of certainty that chair is going to hold your fat ass. You have confidence in the absence of certainty that, that your car's brakes are going to keep working, that a brick wall is not going to materialize directly in front of you as you're driving down the highway. You have confidence in all of these things, but you can't be absolutely certain about it. And so what that does is it sets up a false equivalency where they are putting their unwarranted belief in something supernatural for which there is zero evidence that actually would suffice to confirm that. They want to put that on the same level as the germ theory of disease, merely because they're not absolutely certain. And that's like saying you are just as good as the person who got a 95% on the test because you got a 5%. It wasn't a 0, and therefore we're all the same. You weren't perfect and I wasn't perfect. Ha, ha, ha. That's basically what they're doing with that. Thank you very much, Godfrey. $10 from Doc Pleromanot. When you were in church, were your endeavors into the dark arts, magic frowned upon, or liberating post-deconversion release? I wasn't into the dark arts. The prestidigitation that I did were just tricks. And actually, they did magic tricks in Sunday school. I've talked before about how much I fucking hate gospel magic. I just despise it. It's rare that they're actually using a particularly good trick or illusion, but it's worse when it's like, oh, look at this. This rag is all dirty. It represents your soul. It has been covered with sin and is blotched with all these black marks. And I have this cardboard box that's got a dragon on it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this sinful cloth in here like this. And then look, here's a red cloth that represents the blood of Jesus. Jesus died on the cross, and we'll put that in there too, and we'll shake it all up. Oh, we've pulled it out. Now this is a perfectly pure white cloth. All the sin has been removed from it. Jesus has saved you from it. Oh my God, I want to puke and like throat punch a children's church teacher. Not actually, because I don't ever advocate violence, but ugh. It's gross. So no, it wasn't frowned upon. I also grew up in a family of card players. So I had a deck of cards in my hand since before I knew what the hell they were. And Nah, my family were always supportive of the fact that I like doing magic, but they knew it was all tricks. They knew I wasn't summoning demons to do my dirty work. $5 from Braden Simpson. Does the burden of proof that God exists always belong to a theist? What if I say there is no God? So you're asking two different questions. Does the burden of proof that God exists always belong to the theist? Yes. A theist is someone who's convinced that God exists. They have adopted a position that has a burden of proof. Whether or not they want to meet it's another thing. If you say there is no God, you have also adopted a burden of proof. If you assert there is no God, you have adopted a burden of proof. The burden of proof is not on the theist. The burden of proof is not on the atheist. The burden of proof is on the claimant for any claim. If you want to claim the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, that's a claim. You have adopted a burden of proof. You may or may not want to meet it. You may or may not care, but you've adopted a burden of proof. If you want to see, as a caller did earlier, if you want to say, I experienced something that is supernatural, you've adopted a burden of proof. It's not up to everybody else to prove you wrong, unless they say, no, what you experienced was not supernatural. And now they've adopted a burden of proof. The burden of proof is on the claimant. Theism and all of these things are irrelevant. Logic is content agnostic. It doesn't care whether we're talking about theism or politics or economic systems or big toe size. If you make a claim, you've adopted a burden of proof. Thank you, Braden. $10 from Sean. Matt, I took a logic class and loved it. Can you explain the difference between logic and epistemology, or are they synonymous? Logic is, wow. Epistemology is the specific study of how we know what we know. And more specifically, it is what methodologies we use to confirm knowledge. Logic, as I said, is content agnostic. It is not about confirming knowledge or getting to truth or anything. It is merely the structure, the system. And so if you want to look at it like a Venn diagram, logic, if we were to look at it as identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle, is a Venn diagram with a single circle where A is in the circle and everything outside the circle is not A. And so from that, you can say that A is A, not A is not A. Everything is either A or not A, and nothing is both A and not A. That's the foundation. What A is irrelevant from the standpoint of logic, especially when we're talking about, syllogistic logic, propositional logic, that sort of thing. There's going to be some differences when you get into, modal logic and things like that. But that's logic. Epistemology is, what is your method of determining what things are reasonable to believe? And your epistemology can include, and perhaps should include, logic. But when you construct a syllogism that is logically valid, which means true premises necessarily lead to true conclusions, epistemology is where you get to, do I accept that these premises are true? Not, are they true? Do I accept that they're true? And epistemology is where you get to the why do you accept those things. So they're not synonymous. $9.99 from Daniel. If your definition of atheist can include babies, then babies can be atheists. If it doesn't, they can't. Please stop fighting mom and dad. Fair. And that's why, if your definition of atheist is someone who has been presented with a God concept and rejected it, then babies don't qualify. $4.99 from Stephen. Last day for recovering from religion. The fundraiser ended like a week and a half ago.
Yeah, I think it was 6 days from the event, so it definitely ended a while ago.
And it resulted, for anybody who hasn't seen it, in this amazing tattoo on my calf of that drawing by Seth Andrews, done by the incredibly amazing and talented Steve Byrne at Rock of Ages Tattoo. here in Austin. So yeah, I said I'd do that when we got to 40,000. We did over $68,000 in that fundraiser. Huge thank you to all of you for doing that. It was absolutely great. Last super chat of the day, unless you get it in while I'm reading this one, but I'm definitely, I don't think it's like $5 to Skeptoidius. Thousands of different deities and religions have been dotted throughout history, and yet not a single one of them has been demonstrated. Yeah, and it's curious. None of them show up to say, I'm the right one. If you were God, I'm tipping part of my book at this point. It's called If I Were God. If I were God and I wanted people to know I existed, I'd not just tell them, I'd show them. And I wouldn't want people sitting around having debates and having to understand cosmology, philosophy, logical argumentation, fallacies. You wouldn't have to know all of that stuff in detail in order to have warrant. I don't need to know any of that stuff to know that Arden exists and that Arden loves me. None of those things require me to have knowledge on 25 subjects. There's nothing else that we believe generally when we talk about this, where we're going to engage in debates that require somebody like me to have a broad range of knowledge on a broad bunch of topics. I've got to know bunches of different things about different philosophies, bunches of different things about different religions, bunches of different things about different sciences, because these things all get together and this is what people are going to attack. This is how we're going to do this. It is absurd, the amount of shit that I need to study to be able to answer all the people who've never fucking studied this stuff. Why do I have to work to be an expert? Because all of these God botherers are too fucking lazy to become an expert on any of it. I'm not an expert on any of it, but I know almost all of it way better than almost any theist. There are some brilliant theists who know way more than me on many, many, many topics. Don't take this the wrong way. But the average Joe or Jane sitting in their church doesn't know shit about logic, doesn't know shit about fallacies, doesn't know shit about syllogisms, doesn't know anything about the burden of proof, doesn't know anything about science, doesn't know anything about evolution that they didn't hear from Kent Hovind or Ken Ham, doesn't know anything about cosmology, doesn't know anything about the germ theory of disease, doesn't know anything about any of the subjects that they think that they've reached the right conclusion and right answer on. It is pathetic and embarrassing that for 20 years, I've sat here engaging with theistic believers, theistic advocates. I now know a lot. I know more than I ever thought I did. I ever thought I would. And yet I still don't know anywhere near enough. I'm not an expert on anything. There is not outside of like esoteric things about just me, and I'm not even necessarily the world's biggest expert on me. Outside of those things, there's nothing that I'm an expert in. If I have some expertise, it might be in taking complex topics and making them approachable, making them accessible to many different people. But how embarrassing for the theists that not only is it not obvious that their God exists, that they're not able to present a valid and sound argument supported by evidence, that they proudly parade their ignorance on 5,000 different topics while smugly thinking that they've got a best friend who exists outside of space-time who knows it all, so they don't need to know a thing. There is an injustice. Bertrand Russell identified ages ago that atheists are full of doubt and believers are cocksure. The grand irony that those who know the most know how little they know and are less confident than those people who know the least. This is where the Dunning-Kruger effect comes in. The only reason that it doesn't upset me more is because I'm an obsessive learner. I want to learn as many things. I want to understand the world as best I can. But it definitely annoys me. Not so much that somebody's chosen willful ignorance. Not even so much that they're proud of their willful ignorance, but because they don't recognize the consequences that their willful ignorance has on them, the people they love, and all the rest of the world. This is why we got to push back. We got to do it responsibly, with skepticism, with science, with thoughtful investigation of claims, and by knowing even their holy books and their religious history better than they do. And that's why I'll be back Sundays and next week and everything else to keep doing this, because I have incredible job security as long as there are believers out there who fail to understand anything other than what they were taught in Sunday school, that Jesus loves them. This they know because they don't understand fucking evidence and the burden of proof. We'll see you next time. Next week. Don't forget to tune in to Translate on show tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Thanks to our crew. Thanks to the moderators. Thanks to the screeners. I don't see a scroll of patrons there.
I know. It didn't work the other night. And now it's not working again. Oh, there it is.
There it is.
What the fuck?
You are still the bestest producer, even though you added a gap at the beginning so that I could talk about stuff. That's brilliant. Look at everything she does is right. Even when she makes a mistake, it's better than anything that I'm going to do. On that note, take care of yourself, take care of each other, keep learning things,